All right. Preparation for the meeting, if we could have everyone mute themselves, and we will begin.
Humans,
Humans,
I note
I know.
differences in the human family. Some of us are serious, some thrive on comedy, some declare their lives are lived as true profundity, and others claim they really live the real reality. Variety of our skin tones can confuse bemused delight, brown and pink and beige and purple, tan and blue and white. I've sailed upon the seven seas and stopped in every land. I've seen the parts of the world, not yet one common man. I know 10,000 women called Jane and Mary Jane. I've not seen any two who really were the same. Mirror twins are different, although their features jibe, and lovers think quite different thoughts while lying side by side. We love and lose in China. We weep on England's moors and laugh and moan in Guinea, thrive on Spanish shores. We seek success, are born and die in Maine. In minor ways, we differ in major ways. I note the obvious differences between each sort and type, but we are more alike, than we are unalike. We are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike. We are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike.
Good afternoon. Host Philip Mobley. Normally, I host an evening discussing race with my Eugenia Rice. This is where I met Hoda Hosseini. When she asked Bob and I to partner on this discussion, we were honored. Today's International Forum on Slavery and its effect on modern day policing is open to all. We know your time is valuable and Zoom meetings are wonderful. So thank you sincerely for attending and participating in such a noble endeavor. We are streaming live on Facebook at Iranian Baha'is for Racial Justice. So if an ally is wanting to attend but are having difficulty getting in, they can join us there again as well. Slavery. The very word conjures up feelings of hopelessness, despair, pain, and injustice. Often, when we hear that word, we thank God that we were not born into it. We thank God we did not suffer. We pray to God that we never go back to it. But it is still with us. We have disguised it. We hide it. We even abide it. We call ourselves forward thinking, yet slavery's cold iron shackles are all around us. Slaves today outnumber the ones freed by Lincoln during the Civil War. The 13th Amendment created to re-enslave my people. Though I work with police for the past 20 years, I struggle with the history of law enforcement and the generational fear of what has been done to my people at the hands of slave patrols of yesterday and today. Here today to help heal those wounds, to bridge that gap, is a retired 26-year veteran of the police force. His unique insight and experience, coupled with an unquenchable thirst for knowledge and passion to educate, is invaluable in our quest for equality. The way forward is looking back. Ladies and gentlemen, Bob Henderson.
Thank you, Philip, for that introduction. And I'm so glad you're all here. I want to thank everyone for being here. You know, there are so many things you could be doing right now. So we are very grateful that you chose to be with us. I want to send a special thanks, like Philip did, to Eugenia Rice, Hoda Hosseini, but I also want to include Barbara Talley for helping us spread the word about this presentation. Now, before I share my slides, I have a whole slide deck to share with you. I want to talk to you briefly about the word justice. The word is often used, but with many different interpretations as to what it actually means. However, there's very little doubt that the majority of people can immediately recognize injustice when they see it. For example, what comes to mind when I say slavery, Holocaust, income gap, hunger and food insecurity, or Japanese internment camp? You see how your mind immediately recognizes those things as injustice? Now, what do we consider as the standard for justice? And would you recognize it if you actually saw it? For some, justice means that people should only get what they deserve. But what if under that situation, those circumstances, that definition, someone decides that there are those who are undeserving? Would that be justice? Many think it is. In seeking answers to what justice is and the standard for recognizing it when it is in operation, I read definitions in various dictionaries and perused through scholarly journals on the subject, all of which were not comprehensive enough to address all of the challenges of our modern day world. I also searched for these two answers in the writings of Baha'u'llah, who is the founder of the Baha'i faith, of which I am a member. I was awestruck by the answers I found in just a few short words wherein he writes, quote, "The purpose of justice is the appearance of unity among men." Now, the word men, of course, he is referring to all mankind. The purpose of justice is the appearance of unity among men. So with that concept of justice in mind, I began reflecting upon its implications to society at large. I would like to share with you briefly some of my reflections on this subject. If the purpose of justice is the appearance of unity among all peoples, you would also witness other principles at play, such as equity and equality, being fairly applied to everyone, regardless of someone's skin color, gender, national or cultural origins, or creed. Now, I thought about a simple analogy on this point. Just as the human body maintains its eternal order with all of its diverse organs and parts through a process medically known as homeostasis, justice, when properly implemented, would be the operating principle in society for maintaining our collective order. In this definition, each individual will be born into the world as a trust of the whole, and therefore deserving of all of its rights and privileges. I ask that you keep this definition of justice in the forefront of your mind as we navigate through this presentation, because ultimately this presentation is about justice for all of us. So with that said, I'm going to share my screen, and I hope to do this successfully. Okay. So the overarching talk here is actually the history of racism in America. And what I'm going to be doing is taking a particular component of racism in a discussion with you about its impact on our criminal justice system. So today's topic is on slavery and its impact on present day law enforcement. You know, I've been a law enforcement officer, as many of you know, for over 26 years. And, you know, I've always been concerned about, well, you know, working in that field, all of the injustices I've seen and how it's impacted people of color. It was only until I retired about 4 or 5 years ago that I began to explore this phenomenon and try to figure out exactly what is wrong in particular with our field of the criminal justice system. And I found some startling answers that I want to share with you, and that's the purpose of this presentation today. Now, I want to start with a question for all of us. Why is history important? And I want you to just think of this and ponder this as we go through this presentation. But I really want you to think about it. Why is history important? I mean, if I were to poll you, I'd probably get many different answers, all of which are probably amazing answers, things I've never even thought of before. But I wanted to just take a moment and have us each reflect. So before I move on, I'm hoping that each of you would have an answer to this question before I navigate any further. So why is history important? I want to share with you one of my, a famous quote. I'm sure you've all heard this quote before from George Santayana, who wrote, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." Now, when I start thinking about, history in relationship to slavery and its impact on Africans and African-Americans, I really realized that we've never truly have paid homage to what has happened to our people. So this is my small attempt on what's going to come next to be able to do that. And in doing this, what I did was I wrote a poem to my brothers and sisters wearing the badge. And ultimately what I'm trying to do is if I can do this nationwide, I'd love to, if that's God's will. I want to go to these different departments to share with them the history of slavery and its connection to current modern day law enforcement, so they have some understanding of what has occurred. So I want to share a poem with you that I wrote to my brothers and sisters. And it starts off with, "Dear brothers and sisters displaying the badge, the victims of injustice speak from their graves. So let's examine their fate. Here is a man whose only crime was being born Black, a man of African diaspora. You may have seen him before. Here is a man who was wronged by repeated blows from the master's cowhide whip and dared to say, 'I'm tired, oh master, I simply need to rest.' He was without guilt, without a trial, a man drowned in woe, showed no compassion, and cast into a lonely and forgotten pit. Here is a man who now speaks from the grave. He's been with us for nearly 402 years. Are you listening? His story is written in laceration and pain. Now, here is a man representing those who ran from the master's cowhide whip. He was running for his freedom and was paraded and beat into a bloody morass. Here is a man who was said to have had a mental illness because his spirit longed to be free, to break from the narrow cage of sorrow and injustice. Here is a man who now speaks from the grave. He's been with us for nearly 402 years. Are you listening? His story is etched in 1,000 wounds. Where is God's justice? I exclaim. Where is God's justice? Where is God's justice? I exclaim. My fellow brothers and sisters displaying the badge, where in the courthouse of public opinion do you stand? Mother Justice also cries from the grave. Will you stand alongside me, shoulder to shoulder in serried lines, and lift her up? Lift Mother Justice up for all to cheer. The world stands by. They all want to know, is Mother Justice real or merely made of dust and clay, a figment of showmanship and pride? She is telling us to go back, not forward, to learn from the past and to listen to the Black voices of our dead, or suffer a fated rerun of history.
With the Capital One Venture Card, you earn unlimited double miles on every purchase every day.
Objection! My credit card doesn't earn double miles on every purchase.
Overruled. With the Venture Card, it's every purchase. What's in your wallet?
The death of an unarmed black man.
George Floyd!
It has been incredibly difficult to prosecute a police officer successfully.
I'm here because I'm sick and tired of seeing black men and women be killed and nothing be done about it.
We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality.
Jonathan Farrell was unarmed when he died, just a month shy of his 25th birthday.
Now that officer, Randall Carrick, is charged with voluntary manslaughter.
A mistrial was declared in the case of a white police officer who shot and killed an unarmed black man. There were protests outside the court after the mistrial was announced Friday.
Shoot! Young and black! Don't shoot! Unarmed! Don't shoot! Unarmed! Don't shoot!
Death of Eric Garner of a heart attack on Thursday. The father of 6 can be heard on the tape saying repeatedly,
I can't breathe! I can't breathe!
There needs to be prosecution. That's what this is all about.
Many people simply cannot understand why the grand jury did not indict when they could actually see video of what went down between that New York police officer and Eric Garner.
Michael Brown, an unarmed 18-year-old, was shot and killed during a struggle with a Ferguson police officer.
Officer Darren Wilson will not be indicted.
It's the feeling among many of these people that black lives don't matter. Not one reason did this grand jury find to indict him.
I ask a question.
yes.
How can we be promised that this injustice will happen again to another black kid?
In another state tomorrow.
How can we assure our kids that they're safe out on the street with your officers?
That's my
That's
question.
what I want to know. I have a black child.
Chicago police officer Jason Van Dyke shot and killed 17-year-old Laquan McDonald.
For the first time in 35 years, a Chicago police officer is charged with first-degree murder.
That officer found guilty of second-degree murder. Very unusual, very important one.
It just goes to show you how serious that I am about my life and all these other lives that are out here that are scared of the police.
An officer shot and killed 12-year-old Tamir Rice on Sunday.
Tamir Rice was playing with a pellet gun when officers arrived, and one of them opened fire within 2 seconds.
The grand jury decided not to indict the 2 officers who shot and killed 12-year-old Tamir Rice.
Cleveland's prosecutor calls it a tragedy, but not a crime.
Doesn't even warrant a trial. That, in my mind, is unacceptable.
Think of the death of Freddie Gray.
All lives matter, but you got to think about who dying out here.
Prosecutors in Baltimore dropped all remaining charges against 3 police officers in the Freddie Gray case.
Samuel DuBose was shot in the head Sunday after being pulled over for a missing license plate.
Officer Raymond Tensing has now been charged with murder and voluntary manslaughter.
The only reason why Tensing is being charged is because there was a body cam. Yes.
Now those charges have been dismissed.
Black Lives Matter!
We will never get a conviction in this case.
The death of Alton Sterling,
African-American man killed by police in Louisiana.
The Louisiana Department of Justice cannot proceed with a prosecution.
All we want is the same justice that they put against us whenever we go through certain trials and tribulations.
Philando Castile, a supervisor at a school cafeteria where kids loved him.
Police officer Geronimo Yanez shot Castile to death while he was in the car with his girlfriend and her 4-year-old daughter.
Jurors found Yanez was reasonable in his decision to shoot and kill Philando Castile during a traffic stop last July.
Under the circumstances, just because he was a police officer, that makes it okay.
I think the past 2 shootings with Alton and Philando have really sparked something.
There's people being murdered unjustly and not being held accountable. Cops are getting paid leave for killing people.
former fans burning his number 7 jersey.
I hope you get cut.
40-year-old Terrence Crutcher was killed on Friday when local officers responded to a call of a stalled vehicle in the middle of the road.
12 jurors found TPD officer Betty Shelby not guilty of manslaughter in the shooting of Terrence Crutcher.
The facts were there. All the elements of manslaughter was there.
The death of 22-year-old Stephon Clark sparked nationwide protests.
Clark was hit 20 times. He was in his grandparents' backyard at the time.
This is what we have to do to not only this young man, but those who are going to come behind him.
Federal police officers will not face charges saying they did not break any laws when they shot Stephon Clark.
George Floyd died in police custody after an officer pressed his knee into Floyd's neck.
Said, "I can't breathe," eerily similar to what we heard in 2014 with Eric Garner.
Black Lives Matter.
I filed an amended complaint that charges former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin with murder in the 2nd degree.
George Floyd, whose killing by U.S. police triggered anti-racism protests right around the world.
Weeks of global protests and international support
and impact around the world.
Protesters marched once again in cities worldwide, demanding police departments change their tactics.
George Floyd! George Floyd! George Floyd!
And the death.
Now, how do we understand this? Understanding the current functioning of our criminal justice system. I mean, after all, the system is there to protect and serve us, to treat us all equally. To get started here, I want to remind all of us, or remind you, that the institution of our criminal justice system includes law enforcement, prosecution and defense lawyers, and our courts and prisons. To understand its current functioning, it is essential that we look to its inception and then track its progress all the way to today. So I'll do my best within this short time frame to try to give you that experience. So we have to go back, believe it or not, we have to go back at the beginning. We need to talk about chattel slavery. It was a complete process of dehumanization. So chattel slavery was the owning of human beings and their offspring as property, able to be bought, sold, given, and inherited. You know, the first slaves arrived in the colony of Virginia in 1619, and this involved the forceful kidnapping of African men, women, and children from all that they have known and stripping them of their culture, their history, their language, and their traditions, and bringing them to a completely foreign land. These were fathers, sons, mothers, daughters, husbands, wives, and grandparents. Africa has always been a home to some of the oldest civilizations in the world, where they had kings and queens. But European colonization devastated traditional African societies and economies. Africans were not equivalent to wild beasts in the jungle as were espoused by many who needed to be saved, which led to the white savior complex and the false rhetoric behind Africans being considered the white man's burden. So we need to talk about what's at the core of racism. So if you want to understand anything, I think the question would be, what's at its core? So our nation was founded upon the false ideology of white supremacy, and I'll define it for you, which is a spiritual and social disease created from a false belief in white superiority and Black inferiority. So that's the cause. The effect of it, every cause has an effect. The after effect is anti-Blackness, resistant or antagonistic to people of color, Black people, and their values or objectives. Now, if you were to Google evolution, right, you would see a racial hierarchy. And at the top of this evolutionary ladder, you would see a white person. At the bottom, you would see, into this evolutionary ladder, you would see a black person. So it was this belief that blacks were considered less evolved, subhuman, and therefore inferior. Now, as we track the core of racism throughout history and as it relates to the criminal justice system, I want you to bear this in mind, because racism can change faces. And I have a little goofy example I can give. So if I take two pieces of bread and I put a taco in between the two pieces of bread and I want to call it a sandwich, I know at its core it's still a taco, right? So racism, we've seen different iterations of this, but at the core of it is this false belief in white supremacy, which again, it's the effect of it is anti-black. It's all things black, must be disregarded as less than. So I want to also define racism, because this can be a complicated term. We oftentimes use the same word in conversations. We're talking to each other using the same word, but we mean different things. So there's a lot of confusion around it. So when I say racism, here's a definition that I'm referring to. It's an oppressive system. It's a system with the following three components. And these three components are very, very important to understanding law enforcement, and it's the genesis of it. So one of the things, it has a component of racial prejudice. Now, anyone can be a bigot, but what makes racism are these two other components. So it's racial prejudice towards Black people, people of color, but it also has legislative power attached to it. And as we go through the presentation, you'll see examples when I say legislative power. Actually, it actually becomes part of the law, stripping Black people of all of their rights and viewing them as property. But if you're going to have laws, you need a system of enforcement, right? It has to be something that's being enforced. What's the purpose of having laws if they're not being enforced? And also social power, where the whole system buys into this false rhetoric and rises up against those that are viewed as less than. In this case, we're talking about the system of slavery. So I want to clarify this, because so many people, really use racism and say, well, anyone can be a racist and so forth. But it's those who own the power, those who are at the table making those laws. And then how are those laws enforced? Are they enforced fairly or unfairly? That's what makes it that's what makes it a racist system. Now, I want to, this as an example of this, I wanted to talk to you about how this became part of the legislation, right? Going back to slave codes. We first saw some slave codes in 1704, actually codified. And here are some examples of this against Blacks, against people from Africa. They would be subjected to lifelong bondage. So it wasn't like indentured servitude where you can, buy off your time through work. It's a lifelong bondage, and your kids and your grandkids are all, victims of a lifetime of bondage. Rejecting slavery was punishable by death. No right to bear arms or self-defense. No legal rights if accused of a crime. No right to own property. Prohibited from testifying in court against whites. Prohibited from congregating. This is something that's still in effect today in terms of how Black people, how they're experiencing things and the after effect of internalized racism. Don't get in too much of a large group. That becomes very threatening. Traveling restrictions. Prohibited from marrying. Prohibited from reading and writing. Permitted whites to inflict corporal punishment such as whipping, branding, maiming, and torture. I'll read that again. Permitted whites to inflict corporal punishment such as whipping, branding, maiming, and torture. It was also codified into our Constitution. The Fugitive Slave Clause of the United States Constitution requires a person held to service or labor who flees to another state to be returned to his or her master in the state from which that person escaped. The first one was drafted in 1787. Then we have some different iterations, all getting worse and worse for people of color. 1793 and 1850. And everything was pathologized. The system of slavery pathologized every aspect of the Black body. So science was part of this, right? So scientific racism. They were considered, if you were to run away, I mean, think about that. If you're an enslaved and you're in a very oppressed system, I mean, wouldn't you try to escape? I know I would, right? And so they codified this as a mental illness. Drapetomania was a conjectural mental illness that in 1851, American physician Samuel A. Cartwright hypothesized as the cause of enslaved Africans fleeing from captivity. The proposed cure was whipping. So can you imagine the depth and degree upon which you are viewed by the others that's othered you, and just a completely dehumanizing process. Now, who's enforcing? Let me go back. Who's enforcing these laws? Slave patrols, the precursor to modern day policing. In 1704, the colony of Carolina developed the nation's first slave patrol. Slave patrols helped to maintain the economic order and to assist the wealthy landowners in recovering and punishing slaves who essentially were considered property. So, as I said quite repeatedly here, slavery was a brutal and violent system, and the goal was to maintain social control. Now, if you're going to subjugate people, you needed to, who are going to naturally rebel, then you're going to need to have a brutal system that meets that effort, and that's what you saw. So for those who aren't aware, up until right now, this is the precursor, this is the genesis of our modern day policing. It was put together to monitor and control the complete lives of people, of Africans. Here's a badge that always makes me cringe, Runaway Slave Patrol badge. I do swear that I will, as searcher for guns, swords, and other weapons among the slaves in my district, faithfully and as privately as I can, discharge the trust reposed in me as the law directs to the best of my power, so help me God. No, come on. So help me God. So God is in the picture here. So you can see how demented this thinking is. So then we had what? We had a civil war, and let me make it very clear, and I think most everybody here attending this have that clarity, that the Civil War was not about state rights. It was about the state's rights to maintain the system of slavery. And this resulted in approximately 620,000 soldiers dying from combat, accident, starvation, and disease. And this was divine chastisement. And the question is, have we learned from this chastisement? How many more people have to die? I gave a presentation in the past where I pulled up all of the race riots since the founding of this country, and the list just goes on and on and on. And the reason why is when we're looking at racism as a disease, we see that unless we can actually cure the root cause, we're going to continue having this issue. So for those who say we live in a post-racist society, I invite you to pay close attention to this presentation. So now we come to the 13th Amendment. But I must say before I read this that prior to the 13th Amendment, the narrative was that Black men in particular were docile, naturally subservient, and childlike, because this kind of thinking worked well in a slave society, right? You can't have Black people being viewed as dangerous because that wouldn't be good for people's psyche. They were unable to sleep at night. So they were viewed as docile, subservient, and childlike. Now, after the 13th Amendment, where Blacks are getting their freedom, the narrative changed to say that Black people were a danger to white people, particularly Black men being a danger to white women. That was the justification. There was this great fear around this, that Black men would, would go around, assaulting white women. And this was the genesis of Black skin being dangerous and something to fear and criminal. So this is something I really want you to pay attention to. This was something that I keyed in on when I was trying to understand why we have this current problem of so many unarmed black people being killed by white officers. So black skin was pathologized. It was viewed at this point as something to fear. Now, when you combine fear with law enforcement, the fear of black people, when I'm saying the fear of black people with law enforcement, that is an explosive environment. Why? Because officers can justify taking your life if I can show that I feared for my safety or the safety of someone else. Now, what if there's something else in the picture? What if I have a natural fear through my subconscious sort of generational pass on about black people that I'm not even maybe conscious of? How does that factor into all of this? I invite you to just think about that. So it says here that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Now, I think all of you are very, very familiar with the 13th Amendment. God, it's a blessing that this amendment was passed. However, there's always a flaw in something. There's always elements of anti-blackness in here, in areas where codes can be exploited. And I think you know what part of this I'm referring to. Except as punishment for a crime. In other words, you can be free from slavery, except if you commit a crime. So all you have to do then is do what? I'm going to go right to where I need to go. Create black codes, right? And so black codes ended with the Civil War, but were replaced by other discriminatory laws known as black codes during Reconstruction. I'm sorry, slave codes ended with the Civil War, but were replaced by other discriminatory laws known as black codes during Reconstruction. This meant that you were barred from engaging in certain occupations, barred from performing jury duties, barred from owning firearms, barred from voting and other pursuits under strict vagrancy laws, under unfair labor contract laws and anti-enticement measures. So let's key in on this strict vagrancy laws, which means you have nowhere to go. So you're now free. You have 246 years of working with no wage, no way to develop resources to help yourself, and then all of a sudden you're free, right? There's no help, no mental health offered, nothing, right? And then so it's very easy to say, okay, these people are wandering about, so let's do what? Let's lock them up for this crime. Blacks who broke labor law contracts were subject to arrest, beating, and forced labor. Apprenticeship laws forced many minors, you can see them here, into unpaid labor for white planters, and just look at the ages of these young people. And then who was enforcing these laws? They were enforced by police, militia. Now, black codes were enforced by all white police and state militia, often made up of what? Confederate veterans of the Civil War. So they had just lost the war relatively recently, and now they're in uniform having power over black people, enforcing unfair laws called black codes. It was slave codes, now it's black codes. So let me digress back to this part. So we also had the 15th Amendment was passed, which allowed blacks to vote. And so we had this beautiful era of Reconstruction from 1865 to 1877. And we see here some of the first African senator and representatives, and there's names there. And I want to tell you that this particular period in our history, Reconstruction, in terms of our blacks gaining their political rights and being able to make a difference, was actually working. But again, if you're operating on a racial hierarchy and you're on top, the greatest fear you have is people gaining mobility. So being able to vote is social power. That means you're going to be able to gain some social status and position in life, be able to have a say-so at the table, the legislative table. Well, what happened was, in a good way, that we had two in particular amendments that came out, and these were they're called Reconstruction Amendments. They were to help free blacks from the terror of white resistance, this anti-black sort of movement that has always been there. So the 14th Amendment, I'll just read this very briefly. I'm sure you're familiar with it. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. In the 15th Amendment, the right of the citizens of the United States to have a vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Okay, so these were two amendments basically offered and given, rightfully so, to Black people to help them gain their rights, right? Their civil rights. They're finally now being invited to this table. So we're going to pin that sort of thought right there, because I'm going to come back to it. Believe me, we're going to come back to it, and I'm going to explain to you something that you may have never heard before regarding that, what happened with our 14th Amendment. So by the end of the 19th century, all major US cities had police departments. And of course, you look at the makeup of these police departments, right? And these are you know, people that some of them fought in the, you know, in the Civil War. Some of them, you know, had parents or grandparents or parents rather that fought in the Civil War. So you can see that their makeup, right? There's no diversity here, right? And so this whole thinking about how to control and maintain, you know, keeping the Black body in its place was the theme that's running through our law enforcement system and our entire criminal justice system. So now we come to Jim Crow laws. So I wanted, many of you know that these are laws, just, you know, segregation laws, but I wanted to just kind of quickly go through these. Public parks were forbidden for Blacks. Theaters and restaurants were segregated waiting rooms and bus and train stations, water fountains, restrooms, building entrances, elevators, and cemeteries. Laws forbade African Americans from living in white neighborhoods. Segregation was enforced for public pools, phone booths, hospitals, asylums, jails, and residential homes for the elderly and handicapped. Some states required separate textbooks for Black and white students. Marriage and cohabitation between Black and white people was strictly forbidden in most Southern states. Signs posted at town and city limits warning African Americans that they were not welcome. Okay, so we give you your freedom, 13th Amendment, right? We give you your 14th Amendment, you know, so everyone should be treated equally and all protected under the law. But you're still not welcome, right? There's a pushback, right? This is when I say anti-Blackness, there's this pushback on that Black skin. So, and I also want to just remind everyone that it wasn't like the bad South and the good North, right? So Jim Crow, this issue was, you know, cancer doesn't, when it's operating within the body, it doesn't oftentimes stop in one spot. It can metastasize. And this is what's happened. It's spread throughout the entire body of our nation. So Jim Crow in the North was not immune to Jim Crow law, you know, Jim Crow-like laws. Some states required Black people to own property before they could vote, right? So that was one way to, you know, to prevent you from voting. Voter suppression. Schools and neighborhoods were segregated and businesses displayed white-only signs. During the Great Migration, 6 billion African Americans moved from the South to the North and West regions between 1960 and 1970. This triggered, as I mentioned earlier, numerous race riots throughout the entire country caused by white domestic terrorists. And then we had this codified and confirmed that, you know, separate but equal doctrine, the separate but equal doctrine, right? So that the US Supreme Court in Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896 Supreme Court decision, which wrongly stated that it did not violate the 14th Amendment. It was later overturned, late, you know, 1954, 1955. But we know that this was a false interpretation of the 14th Amendment. Now, between the 1860s and the 1960s, thousands of Black Americans were killed in public acts of racial terror. And this anti-Blackness continues. It continues. And who were the ones committing these acts? You know, we use like domestic terrorists, you know, the KKK. But when you strip off the robes, what you found that those members who were hiding behind that cloth were your judges, your police officers, your doctors, your lawyers, just common folks in the area. Now, when you look at this picture, take for example the picture to the top right or the top left or the bottom right. Pretty much all the pictures except one. Well, they're all pretty much except for one showing people around. But what I want you to key in on is the fact that this was a spectacle. You can see people smiling and having a good time. You see so I always say that there are two, if you were divided in half, there are two victims here. So clearly the Black people hanging from the ropes are a victim, but the whites are also the victim of a lie in their own superiority and in Black inferiority, and in becoming apathetic to the suffering of others. Now we know that all sciences today have confirmed our oneness. Anthropology, physiology, psychology, all recognize that we are one human family, to the extent of us being genetically 99.9% the same. But the impact of this false ideology has created such an illness in the human spirit that still exists today. And so we need to talk later about how do we rid ourselves of this illness. As I mentioned earlier, this great migration, this is sort of a pictorial diagram of showing this mass exodus, because if you have this going on, primarily in the South, some things are lynching, but more race riots are happening in the North. But sort of these brutal hangings were happening primarily in the South. You're going to have a mass exodus. So we're talking about also including in here World War I, and World War II, also happening within this time frame between 1960 and 1970. So there's a lot of job opportunities in these northern areas that Blacks were, going to. So that has to be factored in here as well. Now, when they get there, though, they're going to primarily to these inner cities and forming cities within cities, right? So they're not allowed to commingle with whites. So it was still very segregated, even though they were leaving an area that was even more oppressive. So I want to now, well, let me go back here. I want to share a few more things about this because I think it's worth taking a moment here. So what we saw when Black people went to these inner cities, what we saw was the intentional outcome, and I think it's worth, and if you don't familiar with this term, you could research it yourself. We saw the outcoming of redlining, which occurred between 1934 and to 1968, right? The intentional withholding of funds for housing for Black people. But the problem is, we know most of our wealth, right, we get from land and our homes, right? That's where we get that intergenerational wealth. That was denied to all of these Black people living in these cities. But the impact of this is that it created intergenerational poverty and a wealth gap today between Blacks and whites that look more like an abyss. Now, when you have poverty at that level in these inner cities, where it's been intentionally sort of designed to stay that way, then you have an environment in which racialized policing can then come in and target those areas under the cloak of darkness. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment. So I want to talk to you about qualified immunity and its severe consequences. Qualified immunity and its severe consequences for people of color. Now, although I worked in the system for 26 years, I kind of lost for words here. It's more of an emotional thing going on with me. There were some blinders there as to the system in which I'm participating in, if that makes sense. And so I'm doing now some corrective work by going back to make some things right that have always been wrong. But in order to describe this, I want for us to get reminders about the 14th in the 15th Amendment in regards to qualified immunity. In particular, I want to focus in on the 14th Amendment. Remember, the 14th Amendment was primarily for newly freed slaves. So bear that in mind. And as a reminder of what it states, it says that no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So basically saying that anything within the Constitution, that you are now protected under this, the 14th Amendment. So all of the rights and protections under the Constitution, the 14th Amendment says, are now, being bestowed upon newly freed slaves. Also, in 1871, because of all of the attacks and the anti-blacks that were going on with preventing blacks from voting and from the hanging and all of the violating of their rights, Congress passed what's called the Ku Klux Klan Enforcement Act. So again, if you have a law, or in this case, you have an amendment, you need to basically attach to that amendment its protection, right? What are the consequences for violating the 14th Amendment? And that's what this is. So this states, and I'll have to read the whole thing because it's very important to where I'm going with this. Every person who, under the color of any statute, ordinance, regulation, custom, or usage of any state or territory, or the District of Columbia, subjects or causes to be subjected any citizen of the United States or other person within the jurisdiction thereof to the deprivation of any rights, privileges, or immunities secured by the Constitution and laws shall be liable to the party injured in an action at law, suit in equity, or other property proceeding for redress. I know that's a mouthful, but what that says is, if you violate in any way the 14th Amendment or any other, amendment of the Constitution, you are going to be strictly liable. So you can then be sued personally, right? Civilly for that violation. It was a strict liability law and an act to protect people of color. But what in the world has happened to this act? So let's talk about this. Let's talk about qualified immunity. It is one of the most aggressive and egregious legal errors in the history of the Supreme Court. And that's not hyperbole. That I'll explain what I mean by this. Qualified immunity eviscerates accountability for law enforcement, allows officers to violate someone's constitutional rights, commit aggressive acts of violence, and be able to use their badge as a get-out-of-jail-free card. Officers ultimately suffer the reputational loss by law enforcement when unprofessional officers commit misconduct. There's certainly a lot of good officers out there doing the right thing, being professionals. Now, it also does two things. One, it eviscerates that reputational loss, accountability rather, that you gain from doing the right thing, but it also breaks down public trust needed for law enforcement officers to do their job. There have been many studies where you poll large numbers of Black people and you say, how do you feel about law enforcement? And they say, well, I fear, they're not there to protect us. I'm scared of them. I fear them. And you do the same poll with white people and they say, well, they're there to protect us. They're there to serve us. And we think they're doing a great job, right? So there's this disconnect. And here's why. And there's many reasons. I'm not going to say that this is the sole reason, but it's certainly a reason that we all should be aware of. And so we had the law protecting us, against violations of our constitutional rights. And then we had, of course, the Ku Klux Klan Act, right, that I spoke about. But unfortunately, in 1982, the Supreme Court grafted qualified immunity onto the U.S. Code, 1983, which is that protection code. Qualified immunity, here's what qualified immunity is, for those who may not be aware of this. Qualified immunity grants immunity. In case you're wondering why officers can just gun down an unarmed man and feel like they can just boldly get away with it. Here it is. Qualified immunity grants immunity to government officials such as police officers performing discretionary functions unless the plaintiff can show the official violates someone's clearly established constitutional or statutory rights for which a reasonable person should have known. Let me read a portion of that sentence again. Well, the whole sentence, actually. Qualified immunity grants immunity to government officials such as police officers performing discretionary functions unless the plaintiff can show the official violates someone's clearly established constitutional or statutory rights for which a reasonable person should have known. So I'm going to give you some examples of this, but basically you can violate under this interpretation in the Harlow versus Fitzgerald, which is a Supreme Court case in 1982. What this is basically saying, it says, they're reinterpreting the protection clause we get under 1983, right? That protects the 14th Amendment. So what they're saying is you can violate someone's constitutional rights if there's a clearly established law or clearly established case, a prior case, unless it's a clearly established prior case. So this will only make sense by me giving you an example. So let's take Baxter versus Bracey, and this is a 2014 case. So in this case, Officer Bracey is chasing a suspect throughout a residential neighborhood. And Bracey is a canine officer, which means he has a dog with him, right? Called a canine. And so he's chasing Alexander Baxter throughout this residential neighborhood. And he's wanted for residential burglary. And so Alexander Baxter goes down into runs into an abandoned house and goes into a basement. When he gets down into the basement, he gives up. Basically, he's sitting on the ground and his arms are outstretched. And for whatever reason, Officer Bracey decides that he's going to release his dog on Baxter, and the dog caused significant injuries to one of his arms, requiring significant amount of medical treatment. And so he sues for excessive force. Now, for those who know about the law, it's up to the prosecution, right, to prove their case. The burden of proof rests with the prosecution. So Alexander Baxter's civil rights attorney, who was suing for excessive force against Officer Bracey, had to find a case that was previously litigated in the courts that clearly established that someone violated someone's constitutional rights. And they actually thought they did. And so in the case that they were considering, in that case, it was the same sort of scenario, except that the person that was injured by the dog was laying on the ground with their arms outstretched. Whereas in their case, Baxter was sitting on the ground with his hands outstretched. And because there was that trivial difference, Officer Bracey was granted qualified immunity. So he got away with violating someone's constitutional rights because they couldn't find a case with those exact same set of functional facts. Well, here's another case to make it maybe more clear, and then I'll move on. Corbett versus Victors. This is a 2019 case. So in this case, Officer Victors is chasing a suspect throughout a residential neighborhood, and they come to someone's, and the suspect ran into someone's yard where they're having a family picnic of some sort, where they're children. So Officer Victors didn't know the relationship between the suspect and the family, so he ordered everyone on the ground. And he was able to successfully put handcuffs on the suspect. Well, at that moment, the family dog runs out of the house named Bruce. And by all accounts, Bruce was not being a threat towards the officer, but Vickers starts shooting at the dog, missing repeatedly, but striking a 7-year-old child in the back of the knee who was lying just 2 feet away from him. So the mother, Amy Corbett, sues for damages. I mean, I would. She sues for, this is ridiculous. Now it's up to Amy Corbett's civil rights attorney to find an equivalent case with the same set of functional facts in order to disqualify the officer from getting qualified immunity. And because they were unable to find an exact same type of case with those same set of facts, the officer was in fact granted qualified immunity. And to this day, Amy Corbett has not gotten any money for what's happened to her child. And why were they unable to find an equivalent prior case? Is because it was so preposterous and bizarre what the officer did that there wasn't a case on file for them to use as evidence that there was some clearly established laws that were broken here. And so you see this disconnect between the Constitution and this sort of this really false and wrong interpretation of this act, right? This clearly established law doctrine shouldn't be there. I did my job for 26 years, and I'm proud to say I never violate anyone's constitutional rights. I wasn't in need of this type of protection. Again, it takes away all accountability necessary for us to establish trust with the public. If you know that I can get away with murder, how are you going to establish trust with me? The system has to change. Let me look at it this way. If you went to a surgeon and the surgeon, and you needed, let's say you needed to have one of your lungs removed, right? For whatever reason. Let's say one of your kidneys removed. Let's say you had to have one of your kidneys removed. And the surgeon during the surgery removed some other body part, some other vital body part that you needed. You would of course sue for damages, right? That's called malpractice. But if a surgeon was granted qualified immunity, it will be up to you to find a previous case where that same thing had happened. And if you couldn't, you wouldn't receive any of any fair treatment in terms of justice in that situation, or be able to be properly compensated. So we expect and we demand that other professions are accountable for misconduct. We expect that, but somehow with law enforcement, we are able to have this qualified immunity and be able to get away with things that we shouldn't get away with. Now, again, I promised in a soundbite I did yesterday that I would speak just uncut truth. And that's what I'm doing. So I know there's likely maybe officers in my presentation that are listening to me, but my whole thing now is I want to, because the only way to cure this thing is for someone to step up and start explaining what's happening in our system and what's going on from that perspective, right? I've been in the system and I know what's wrong, and this needs to go away. There's no need for the qualified immunity to be there. Also, I want to talk briefly, and this is about accountability, right? I also want to talk to you about something that many of you don't know, about police unions, which are some of the most powerful labor groups in the nation. They exert a lot of control over local and state politics. Maybe I don't know this about police unions. Many of you don't know, I'm sure don't know about this, but so many have significant financial resources, but here's the part that I want you to be aware of. Oftentimes police unions lobby their respective city halls and state governments from passing laws that would increase transparency in regards to police brutality and reform. They often use their collective bargaining power to advocate for more leniency for abuse of power. So I'm hoping you're doing one primary thing here. I'm hoping you're connecting the precursor for law enforcement from slave patrols and this targeting of Black people, particularly in our inner cities, into some of the laws that have protected police departments from qualified immunity to our police unions. I mean, why in the hell do you need police lobbying for more transparency or against transparency in regards to police brutality and reform? Why would you need to lobby for more leniency for abuse of power? Why would you need to do that? So there's always an effect to these things. So the results of mass incarceration, this is something that, again, primarily in our inner cities, right? Remember, there was this mass exodus out of the South, right, to the northern cities. So all of these, the mass incarceration took place, by the way, in these inner cities. So Black people have never been free from this abuse, from law enforcement targeting them through the system. here's some of the evidence about this. So the US accounts for 5% of the world's population and 25% of all people in prison in the world. Today, 2.3 million people are in prison in the United States. And although comprising only 13% of the United States population, 1 million are African-American. If nothing changes, 1 in 3 Black males born in the United States today will go to prison compared to 1 in 17 whites. Minorities are more likely than white Americans to be arrested. Once arrested, they're more likely to be convicted. And once convicted, they're more likely to face stiff sentences. And I want to give you a graph on this. I doing the job for as long as I did it, for me, I always try to connect dots, and it's all about facts and evidence and what I can put together. I'm used to putting together a case, and so I look at this graph, and this relates to the mass incarceration, and I'm like, what happened in like 1982? 1982, what it really spiked. Let's see what happened in 1982. Harlow versus Fitzgerald, dated in 1982, granting police officers qualified immunity so they can do what? So they can go to inner cities and do the same thing they did during slavery, which is the ripping of families, separating of families that you can never repair. Some say, well, if you can just Black people can just pull themselves up by the bootstraps, if they can just do the right thing, if they can behave better, if they can just get rid of that bad culture, if they just had more discipline. What you don't understand, I'm speaking from a perspective of a Black male living in this country, what you don't understand is when you rip families apart, it impacts us for generations and generations. You can never get that back. When you put people in situations in these inner cities where there's sort of militarized policing and policing that's done in such a racist way, right? How does that impact your self-esteem? And then it's said in these inner cities that, okay, the culture is a culture of drugs, of violence. Black on Black homicide is very, very high. And there's this association with, because it's part of a self-fulfilling prophecy for white people, it's that, okay, look at what's happening. Black people they're thugs, right? They're criminals. They like to shoot each other, not realizing that there's social factors, pre-existing social factors that are causing these issues. If you want to know our culture, look to the Black Renaissance and just look it up. I'm not going to talk about it. That's our culture, right? Music, jazz, blues, art, family, striving to work together. That's who we are. We're not thugs. We're not criminals. Look at this graph. It's shocking. The United States, although it's supposed to be the land of freedom and everyone is supposed to be equal, look where we are. We've made a whole system. If you're not familiar with the prison industrial complex, I mean, we made a business out of arresting people. So now we need to move and transition to solutions, right? And so I know that maybe for a lot of you, it's kind of a heavy burden. If you don't know me, I speak from the heart, but I also speak the truth. And sometimes that can have a heavy impact on people's hearts and minds. And I just have to say ahead of time that we have to get used to having difficult conversations. We have to get used to hearing something that most people say, I don't want to hear that. That's of the past. And my theory is, and my belief is, as a lot of people, is you can't, move forward unless you look back and try to understand what happened. That's how we learn from the past. So this is the sentencing project, which is part of the UN, a department of the United Nations. And this independent department said these words. They said, while the laws of the United States may be facially colorblind, supposedly, a growing body of evidence shows that the individuals who apply such laws do not make cognitively colorblind decisions. As studies repeatedly demonstrate, the belief that the United States of the present is unaffected by the centuries of its explicitly racist past, while perhaps well-intentioned, is at best wishful thinking and potentially blinds decision makers to the implicit racial bias that lingers in the American consciousness. So just rest on that one and just ponder that one. Again, it would be quite naive to think that think about this. This is kind of a logical thinking. We had 246 years of slavery, right, with all of its brutality, followed by over 100 years of Jim Crow laws, right, followed by mass incarceration that began in the 80s, ripping our families apart. What do you expect? There's going to be harm. My God. Excuse me if I get a little emotional, but I'm just kind of a passionate guy about this. I want to share this video with you.
The pulse of Black America is that we're grieving. This system, this society weathers us before we even come out of the womb, because it weathers our parents' nervous system. There is a constant influx of cortisol and adrenaline in order to deal with this stuff. And so what we know is that toxic stress impacts every system of the body. When stuff like this happens, it is not just the grief of watching that brother be destroyed. It is the 400 years of grief that was never addressed. My son is learning how to drive, and it's terrifying me. It's terrifying me, and it's terrifying my wife, that he's gonna be out here. And I won't be with him. I'm sorry. If somebody did something to him, I would lose it. This can't go on. White people have to get their act together. This has to stop. This has to stop. I can't see another body. I can't watch the whole thing. I can't watch that. It's re-wounding and it's re-traumatizing. I can't do that. But if they do something to my baby, I'm done. I'm holding a lot of nervous systems right now, but it's hard. I'm not sleeping. I keep going from sadness to grief to a tremendous amount of rage. The pulse of Black America is that we're grieving. This system, this society.
Okay, thanks folks for listening to that. There's a little delay there. So there's a lot of things happening on many different levels. Our biology, our psychology, our spirituality, everything is impacted by this disease called racism. So some guiding principles for social justice, and I thought of 4 particular things. I think many things, if they're going to change, there needs to be basic principles that we're considering in the process. So, which starts with the basic principle of justice, where we can see that the interests of every individual and those of society are inextricably linked by standards that apply equally to all. So this needs to be our standard of justice, right? Applies equally to all, and that every individual is recognized and protected under the laws. We need to consider inclusion, acknowledgement of the oneness of mankind and the beauty of diversity, right? So we need to change the narrative, right? If subconsciously many officers are thinking in terms of Black people and fearing Black people, and things are operating not just within law enforcement, but our entire nation, then we need to change the narrative about this, right? If the false ideology is that there's one race superior to another race, then changing it with this idea that we are one people, that all the human sciences have confirmed would be a logical way in which we can address this issue, and thinking in terms of, as my faith, talks about. It talks about using wonderful analogies. It says that we are like, human beings are like flowers of one garden, leaves of one tree, waves of one sea. Now, these just may sound poetic, but they're profound in their ability to change the narrative. When you consider leaves of a tree, no matter where that leaf is on the tree, it has equal value to every other leaf, right? Leaves on the top are no valuable than the leaves at the bottom of the tree. So we need to flip the script and change the narrative. We need to reestablish trust, which is a firm belief in the reliability, integrity, truth, or strength of someone or something for which the stability of every human affair depends. So if we want to rethink how we want to, rethink how our criminal justice system should look, it really begins with not only the things that I've already talked about, but also with removing anything that takes away accountability. I talk about a couple of things, talk qualified immunity, how police unions function, for example. But without trust, trust is the only way in which we can establish and do our jobs as police officers. I mean, if your job as a police officer is dependent upon your ability to establish trust with your community, right? And so that has to be part of the restructuring of our criminal justice system, is this understanding that I have to do things in such a way where I can establish trust. So I advocate for my fellow brothers and sisters within the system and those who are in our legislative body of this country to create laws for us that make us accountable. Bring it on, make us accountable. We should be professionals. I mean, if we are requiring every other profession, in the medical professions, every profession, right? There's accountability. Make us accountable. That has to happen to establish, and I wasn't say reestablish trust, but for many communities and departments, that trust has never been there. And lastly, I want to say about one of the central principles is collaboration, working jointly to produce positive outcomes that benefits everyone. So police departments, and there's some that are doing this, and many people are making efforts for this collaboration to take place through town hall meetings, through ways in which the police department can then interact with the community that they're serving. I mean, that's how I was successful. From personal experience, I had a lot of success in the job. And the reason why is I didn't make the community my enemy. I made them my ally. And I saw the community as an extension of myself. So if I wanted to increase my eyes and ears to keep the community safe, I partnered and allied with the community. So I had a lot of success. I made a lot of arrests, righteous arrests, good arrests. But the way I did it was not necessarily through me, but through the community. Someone would say, hey, the person that you're looking for that committed this violation and crime, hey, they're over here, they're over there. They had my number. They could call me. I had a great relationship. So I know from personal experience that collaboration with your community, not only does it establish trust, it builds bonds, and it makes the department more effective. So there's good all the way around. So reimagine our criminal justice system. I wanted to, I have only just a few more slides left here, by the way. So present day conceptions of what is natural and appropriate in relationships. Let me stop there and give you a little background as to why I'm even reading this. So if the criminal justice system from its inception, right, has been, was created and formed during a time where we are believing in white superiority and Black inferiority. And so we created systems to ensure that and to make those self-fulfilling prophecies, right? If now we're thinking differently about how to have a different system, then we have to acknowledge this. And this is what this particular quotation addresses. And this comes from a Baha'i organization that's part of the international community of the United Nations, called the Baha'i International Community. And so they wrote this document, and this is just, I took a portion of it that's very relevant for our conversation. They say that present-day conceptions of what is natural and appropriate in relationships among human beings themselves, between human beings and nature, between the individual and society, and between the members of society and its institutions, reflect levels of understanding arrived at by the human race during earlier and less mature stages in its development. If humanity is indeed coming of age, if the inhabitants of the planet constitute a single people, if justice is to be the ruling principle of social organization, then existing conceptions that were born out of ignorance of these emerging realities have to be recast, right? We live in an ever-advancing civilization, right? And so we need to really think about urgently making changes in the very structures of every institution, not just within criminal justice. I also want to, when we start thinking about reimagining, I want you to also consider this as well, that we need to think about crime differently, right? We promote crime in this country because it's been privatized, right? The prison industrial complex, people make lots of money off criminals. And we know that it doesn't actually work because the recidivism rate in this country is like it's clearly shows that it's not working, right? The purpose of the criminal justice system, or in terms of the prison system in particular, is to prevent crime from happening, right? You serve some time and then it prevents you from going back. That's not what's actually happening. It's a revolving door, but it's an intentional act because people are making money, and the laws are on the books, and cops are enforcing those laws in an unfair way to keep many people of color in those prisons, and so slavery actually has continued today. So we need to think in terms of eradicating such a horrible system that's really not operating in a way that benefits all of us in a way that's fair. So we need to think about reducing crime in a different way. So here's something I want to share with you. This comes from also the writings of my faith. It says that one thing remains to be said. It is that the communities are day and night occupied in making penal laws and preparing and organizing instruments and means of punishment. They build prisons, make chains and fetters, arrange places of exile and banishment, and different kinds of hardships and tortures, and think by these means to discipline criminals, whereas in reality, they are causing destruction of morals and perversion of characters. The community, on the contrary, ought day and night to strive and endeavor with the utmost zeal and effort to accomplish the education of men, to cause them day by day to progress and to increase in science and knowledge, to acquire virtues, to gain good morals, and to avoid vices, so that crimes may not occur. Relatively short paragraph, but very powerful in reimagining our criminal justice system as a component, right? How do we reduce crime from occurring in the first place? Might we consider education? It's something that we need to all think about. I want to share with you a video in a moment, and it's about reimagining things. This is an example of this, right? How do we reimagine something? So to set the stage for this video, in the 1960s, many of you may or may not know, but in the 1960s, there weren't any ambulances in the nation, right? And who was responsible for taking injured people or people who were needed medical treatment to the hospital? In the 1960s, it was the police. But in Philadelphia, in particular, in Philadelphia and many states across the country, police were unwilling to go to certain neighborhoods. And what were those neighborhoods? Black people, in regards to medical treatment. They would go there if it was something related to a crime, but it was related to something medical. They refused to go. So with that said, let me share this video. And please mute yourself. I hear a voice.
I guess I ended up. It's got the game now. Very good. It's something I can get it. Take care of it. I think you got it wrong. So you want to say this could stop it.
Philip, can you mute everyone?
Bob, you're muted. You're muted. I don't think he can hear, unfortunately.
It's okay, Omitra. It's okay.
All right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I wanted to deviate from our conversation a bit, and these are my two amazing sons. I think they're both here, Jason and Kyle, and Jason is 23 and Kyle is 28. And I asked Jason to just say a few words, whatever comes to his heart, and then after that we'll move on with the program. So Jason, if you're there, if you can unmute yourself, and if Philip, can you make him center stage? Okay,
I'll find him. And we've got a number of people here, so I'm looking through.
Okay, all right, hold on, Jason.
So, I have them. All right.
Okay, ready to go. So Jason, go ahead and start talking, and you'll come up.
Cool. So, hi everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Dad. My name is Jason, and yeah, I'd love to share a few words. So, I'm really moved by this conversation I've been hearing more of in recent times, in part because of spaces like this, where the focus is on building bridges and coming to terms with our past so as not to repeat error. I'm moved by anyone working on the skill of trying to understand before they themselves are understood. As far as I can tell, the building of bridges is, in some very real sense, the only way we can properly get across to one another. I have conceptualized myself as and take joy in the idea that I myself am a product of such a bridge. I'm the child of a Black father and a white mother, and being biracial has been such a gift of perspective because I see both sides and have such a love for both sides. And how could I not, because they're me? And I think that's an important point to make in consideration of how we move forward in this conversation, is seeing ourselves in others and subordinating lesser loyalties for the best interest of humankind, which profits from our diversity. Practically, a bridge is a hand extended out in a gesture of trust. It's a willingness to be vulnerable and to admit to not knowing when you don't know. It's the capacity to listen. And so I'm appreciative of this space because it is working to mend the bridge between our past and our present, which is a necessity. I'm a psychology major in college right now, and what I've learned about memory is that the purpose of it, in a purely pragmatic sense, is to have an experience that you can mine for information that you can bring forward into the future that will enable you to act properly. And so a bridge built is in an effort of love. It is a pursuit of connection. And that's a way to frame this work that I find helpful, is the building and mending of bridges. And I think that will do for my sharing. So thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you very much, Jason. I'm now going to turn it over to Philip.
Things are getting much better, but I always wonder when I went to church on Sundays. I've always been one to, I'm not just a boxer. I do a lot of reading, a lot of studying. I ask questions. I travel these countries. I watch how their people live, and I learn. And I always ask my mother, I said, Mother, how come is everything white? I said, why is Jesus white with blonde hair and blue eyes? Why is the Lord's Supper all white men? Angels are white. Pope and Mary and even the angels. I said, Mother, when we die, do we go to heaven? She said, naturally, we go to heaven. But what happened to all the black angels when they took the pictures? I said, oh, I know. If the white folks was in heaven too, then the black angels were in the kitchen preparing the milk and honey. I said, listen, you quit saying that, boy. I was always curious, and I always wondered why I had to die to go to heaven. Why I couldn't have pretty cars and good money and nice homes now? Why do I have to wait till I die to get milk and honey? And I said, Mama, I don't want no milk and honey. I like steaks and I said, milk and honey is a laxative anyway. You know, I said, I'm the Olympic gold medal. 3 days ago, I fought for this country in Rome. I won the gold medal, and I'm going to eat. The manager, I heard her tell the manager, and he said, well, I'm not the man that he's got to go out. Anyway, I didn't raise no, they put me out. And I had to leave that restaurant in my hometown where I went to church and served in their Christianity and fought, and daddy fought in all the wars. Just wanted to go medal and couldn't eat downtown. I said, something's wrong.
Love it.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Love him.
so much, Bob, for that informative, amazing presentation. I know it's a lot for those of you who were so kind to give up your Saturday and join us. But if you can take one piece of information that he presented and go and research it for yourself, you will find volumes of information supporting the facts that he has given you. And as lengthy as the presentation was, it is barely the tip of the iceberg of what's out there. It is all around us. We just need to open our eyes. I'm always struck by this simple fact: the people who have created this incredible country we call America, that the whole world looks to, they created it in a very, very polluted way. And the evidence of its pollution is everywhere. Yet we see them as the intelligent ones, the forefathers, the creator and builder of nations. Yet we have this inability, and specifically them have this inability to see racism, to just wrap their mind around it, to get it, to understand it. Yet they're supposed to be the intelligent ones. I admonish you, do your research, open your eyes, look around you, and extend that helping hand. You've seen behind Bob and I these murals, these pictures, we've defocused them, but they're of multiple races holding hands. We need this unity. It's what's going to heal us. So find a way to connect with your neighbors, both next door and in different countries. We can get through this. If we can put someone on the moon and try to get to Mars, Bob and I were talking about this earlier, we can figure this thing out. We can figure this thing out. And we need you, our Iranian allies, our Jamaican, our Barbadian, you're out there, our Irish, our Catholic, doesn't matter your race or your creed. We can wrap our heads around this and solve it. So we've had some questions that we've got from various sources that have been sent in. And so I'm going to ask Bob a few of these questions. There's a lot of you there. So we toyed with the idea of opening it up to questions, but we feared that it might not give an ample opportunity for everyone to speak. So we chose a few very specific questions from our audience. And so we'll begin with the first. Are you ready there, Bob?
Yes, sir.
All right. So the first question is, what are some of the internal barriers to police healing themselves from the inside out? You're an insider. Your knowledge is invaluable. So I'll give you a second to think about that. What are some of the internal barriers to police healing themselves from the inside out?
Thanks for the question. And it's very difficult to know what resides in someone's heart. You know, in my job, I had to deal with people that, however they were raised, they weren't raised properly. And so they could do really, really horrible things to people. And yet in many cases, those victims were led to believe that this is someone that they could trust. My point is this: you can never really know what's in someone's heart. So with law enforcement, what you need is accountability. You need them to be held accountable no matter what their intentions might be. Someone says, well, my intention, my motive wasn't to do such and such. But like, for example, if you take away accountability, you take away the ability for police unions to be able to lobby for more leniency when it comes to being held accountable for use of force. Take that away, make them accountable, and let's see what changes from there. The deeper question you have is, how do we actually deal with the issue of what's in someone's heart? I think that's there's many ways of going about that. I mean, there's education. There is if you're a person that you know that you have issues of you have racist tendencies, right? And you have also willingness to overcome that issue, then educating yourself about the topic of race, mitigating factors such as, getting a Black friend, getting a person of color as your friend, right? Taking an active step in that direction, becoming an ally of Black people. What we need, and we've seen this historically throughout, the history of this country, and those, even during slavery, those who were anti-slavery and those allies. There's so many amazing white allies that I can think about that have been instrumental in leading to our freedom. And I can only thank God for them, eternally grateful for their efforts. But it was about partnership, right? Working together. So it's a kind of a heavy question, a lot to unpack with the question, but again, if I can just wrap up by reiterating the 2 points I'm making, which is on a professional level, there needs to be greater accountability. On a deeper level, there needs to be honest effort made on the part of society through education, and education can take many different forms, right? Cultural education, but it also could mean a reduction of crime, which changes the perception of how people then even view Black people, in areas where they're they finally are able to make a disconnect between their poverty and the true identity of who someone is. Our culture is not a culture of poverty, right? That's an outcome of racism. I want to make that very clear. So to be able to see each other and the beauty of each other is something that we all need to take this eternal journey, right? To view each other as one family, right? So to change the narrative. So we all need to change their narrative. And, when we speak about efforts of an individual, the more individuals take on this proper ideology about how we should see each other, they take on making efforts to become unified as a community. Once we get enough of a collection of people doing this, that's how we change culture, right? Right now, we don't have enough people making this effort to change culture. But if we move in that direction, then we can see significant change.
All right. I'm looking at the second question that we were given, and it's very similar. I'm going to go ahead and ask it, though. It's given the history of the years of senseless killing of Black people, what steps can the police now take to not repeat the same negative behaviors? Before you answer, I want to put this in context. I think both questions, what they're saying is, we on the outside, these beautiful people who are with us in this Zoom right now, we get it, and we're attending these meetings and we're trying to do the right thing. What can the police do to themselves to stop what they're doing? What are the barriers to them, not the society they serve, but to them? And I know that's a weighty question, but you're the insider, and so we wanted to give you a tough question. And it's not one that has to be answered now. I'm sure people are going to want to come back and have more opportunities to engage, and we're definitely going to provide that. I'm waiting till the end of this presentation, Bob, before I put up a call to action for our folks. But the way that I have to do it could potentially crash the system. So I want to save it for the very end. But we're going to put up a graphic that asks you a few questions, and you can email your responses to me directly, and we'll use those to formulate our next talk. But getting back to the question, not what the society can do, what can police themselves do to themselves to stop the behavior that they're engaged in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and thanks for that question. And that's one of the things that it's a personal project I'm working on, which is being able to go to the different police departments and be able to, with my reputation as one of them, right, and be able to enter their training halls and be able to impact them in this way. They need to know the history of this country, having a fundamental understanding of, in other words, people become police officers today, and they enter into a system, and I was in the system, without any understanding while you're in the system of its history, right? And also how all of that history ties into how you behave today as a police officer. And so what I want to do is be able to help them understand where we've been so they can understand where we are in time. And I want to be able to, through evidence that I have prepared for them, which is, why is it that Black people have been polled nationwide, and they have said, I do not trust the police. I fear the police. I don't think they're there to protect us. And I mentioned this earlier. And white people, the majority of a large number of white people are saying, no, they're there to protect and serve us. So for police officers, they have to ask themselves the question, why is this the case? And that will naturally lead them down the path I want to take them, which is understanding history. Because understanding history frames things for people. By that, I mean, it gives things context. And once you have context about something and understand something, and that's also related to understanding what's the root cause of racism, then I think once you have that understanding, right, there's that moment, there's sort of an epiphany, a moment at which you go, oh, when I am now addressing a Black person, I may have to be a little bit more careful in my word usage, right? So you're aware that they have a lot of fear, a lot of suspicion. For example, I've been talking to Black people in my capacity as an officer, and everything was going well. I was investigating them for something, and everything was going well. My white partner shows up using the wrong tone, the wrong language, the alpha dog mindset, and things went haywire. And I said, you need to let me handle this, because they don't understand that how people hear and feel and see things are different based on your cultural experience. And so there's this disconnect between how officers are relating to Black people. And in their minds, they may think they're actually doing the right thing. As I mentioned earlier in one of my slide presentations, a lot of police officers, and I'd like to change this narrative as well, they think that justice is people getting what they deserve. That's a common definition nationwide. But what if you decided in your mind, and the laws and the history has decided, that there are undeserving people? There are people who do not deserve. Then it's easy to say, I'm implementing justice with this concept of what justice is, which is not actually something that's correct. So people are actually doing their job, thinking intentionally that they're doing the right things, but they're actually causing more harm than good. So I could just talk a lot about this subject, but I want to just highlight this one point before I stop talking about it, which is officers have to get what a lot of people are saying. It's kind of a funny phrase, but it says cops have to get woke. They have to get woke to this idea of the history and the plight that Black people have experienced in this country. And then also, again, it all doubles back to, no matter what you're feeling and experiencing and you're internally, we should all be held accountable. So accountability has to go hand in hand with efforts and knowledge that you gain from that understanding.
Wow. Bob, I want to thank you for an amazing presentation, for all the hours of work you put into it, because I know it's not easy and you're not getting paid for it, but this is definitely something that's in your heart, and it shows in your presentation. as I listen to it, and this is the second time I've been able to hear it, and it just gets better every time. I've taken one thing from it that I think we as a people can attack and attack and attack, and that is this thing called qualified immunity. As you have stated, I think it is at the root of why we can't overcome this issue, specifically with police, right? And that's why most of us are here. So I would like to present a call of action to you, the people who gave up a great portion of your weekend to this presentation. Get in the books, write your congressman, start locally with your city councils, and let's figure out how we can strike this ungodly law from our books. That is the first step to us getting equality and fair treatment from our law enforcement. If someone, I see that the chat room is open. If someone can put my email in, I'm doing something else with the keyboard right now, but it is PLM. Actually, I think I can get it in there right now. I'm going to put my email in the chat room, and I don't want to, without explaining what I'm doing with my system here, because it's not a normal Zoom system. If I do what I'm about to do, it may crash it. So I've just put my email in, and I'm going to read off what I would like you to send to that email. So first of all, please provide the following information. We'd love it if you want to get involved to provide your full name in the email, your phone number, the state that you come from. What did you value most about this program? What specific topic on racism would you like to hear more about in the future? What groups or organizations do you personally know who could benefit from this program? Because we'd like to come forward and present it to them as well for you. So we need allies. We need people to get active and involved and engaged. You can send those responses. You may not have heard them all. I'll read them again, but pick at least one or two and send it to plmproductions@mac.com. That is P as in power, L as in love, M as in minorities, productions with an S at mac.com. That's MAC. So I'm going to read those things again. You want to provide your information, your contact information. You know what that is. What state you're in, because different actions are required in different states and there's different procedures. And so we want to make sure that we are hyper focused on your particular corner of the world. What did you value most about this program? What specific topic on racism would you like to hear more about in the future? What groups or organizations do you personally know who could benefit from this program? All right. And we want to definitely respect your time. We said that this would be a 2-hour event. So at this time, you can go ahead and start logging off. Please share something that you learned from this presentation with your neighbor, with your child, specifically with someone who is an adolescent or a teen, because they're our future. And that's the way we're going to heal this. As they come up in a righteous way, we can become a righteous nation.
If Philip, can I also want to share some closing words when you're done? When you're done.
I am done. Go right ahead.
Okay. So that's also, like I started, I wanted to thank everyone for coming and being here. It's meaningful to all those organizing things like this to have people show up and willing to listen. So for your time and your attentiveness, I really, really appreciate this. It's so heartwarming for me as a dad to see my son here, Jason. I think Kyle here is here as well. So I wanted to just tell you, Jason and Kyle, publicly that I love you and I'm very proud of you. And this program would not be the same without your presence for me. So thank you, everybody. And hopefully I'll see you all soon. And Philip are here and also Eugenia. can Eugenia, can she share a few words if she'd like? I'm sure she's still here, but I'd like to give her an opportunity. She's part of one of the organizers. And if also Hoda wanted to say some closing words as well, that'd be great. So Eugenia, are you there? You can share a few words.
There you go.
Hello, Bob and Philip. It is so great to be in this space with all of you, to see all of the many faces. It was amazing on so many levels, and more so that you are here, you are in this space, shows a willingness to want to move forward. And I say this as a person who lives in the States, but also a person who is from a majority, who is from Barbados, looking in on the inside. So bless you all. And there's that saying that we are more alike than we are different. So we are very much alike. Thank you all, and blessings to you. Thank you. Bless you. Great job.
Thank you from the bottom of my heart, the depths of my heart, for doing this again, Bob. I heard you the first time and there were only 15 people. And I said, this is a travesty, you must be heard. And we will. What we will do, we will continue sharing your message. I've been promised that Philip will send me an edited version of this recording, and we'll make it available. And it will be on the Facebook page, Iranian Baha'is for Racial Justice. But if you're not a member, you could just click on it and I will immediately let you in. And if you're not on Facebook, just put your email in the chat right now, and hopefully Philip will keep it open for a while longer, so that all those who want to get this recording, they will have, we will send you this recording. I promise you we will do that. And all the list of the things that Philip put in. I'm grateful to you, Bob, because first of all, you shared the truth that we have two different criminal justice systems, one for Blacks and one for whites. And knowing that, the truth makes us think what I must stop doing, what I must start doing, what I must continue doing, as my very good friend Barbara Talley has always taught me, my mentor, on how to promote racial justice and what to do. We must put in action, because words are not enough. We have to put it in action. And you've given us so much information, and we will share with as many people as possible. We promise to do that, right, everybody? Yes, and please be ready and listen in, because Bob will be doing more on a series on structural racism and how to dismantle it. So we look forward to his next presentation. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Hoda. And good night, everybody. And thanks for coming again.
Aloha.
Aloha. Aloha.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hoda.
Perfect.
Aloha. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you Friday, Hoda. See you Friday.
Bob, that was wonderful. It was amazing. This was so great. I'm so glad that I was able to be here today.
Thank you, Barbara, for being here. It means a lot to our little team.
The big team.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Bob.
Brother Bob, you know, you had I had mom here. That's why I'm in the car, because I had her watch most of it. Yeah.
All right, you be careful driving though. You know.
No, I'm not driving. I just
okay. Because you scared me. Okay, all right.
Mama Blanche was on also. Mama Blanche was on too, Bob.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's good. Yeah, I saw my mom there. Thanks for making that happen, Omitra. That's awesome.
You're a powerhouse. You're a powerhouse.
Thank you.
We should say prayers for his safety.
Yes, we need to prayers for protection, because that is a problem with the unions, the police unions.
Yeah, I'm aware I'm going into the lion's den, but when the Lord's with you, it's okay, right?
Yeah, well, we
That's
have
right.
to keep praying, keep having you in prayer for protection, because we need you.
That's right.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
right. You know, it's so interesting you say that as he's going into another level. As a sister, knowing he's been in the police force, you know, like you said, for more than 26 years, as a sister, that's always been in my heart, right? And especially when he was going into detective work and things. And now he's taking it to another level, a spiritual level. But it was so funny because I used to always think, God, I feel safer in the world just having my brother out there, because I knew he had so much integrity, you know? And I mentioned this before once, I don't know if others know, but I remember him sharing with me that he had to develop his spiritual capacity of intuition and his knowing, because often his partner was white, his police partner, who didn't have his back, who was often racist. And I just thought, how do you function as a police officer not having that backup? And praise God, he's still here, making his way into the next level of education. So blessed.
Yeah. And I want to say hi to Kathy and Stockton and her friend. Good. I'm glad you were able to come on today. And so thank you for being here.
We brought our courage with us today.
Thank you for being here. It's not easy to getting through this process. So, but it's,
no, we've cried. We've actually thrown up too. But we're here with our courage.
All right. Thank you for being here. It's not, and I just wanted to acknowledge the two of you that when you take this journey through our history, and it needs to be taken, it's very, very difficult and very, very painful, especially people with big hearts like yourselves. You're not callous with, okay, like, who cares? You know, you're very connected to the suffering of others. And we need people like you, right? Who are allies, who are willing to take this journey, although difficult and painful, to understand. Because my question has always been, like how doctors do their jobs, is how do you prescribe the medicine when you haven't fully understood the problem, right? And to understand the problem is that by necessity requires us to go back, not forward, so that we can sort of like understand, at least minimally, like what happened, but not to the point where we are excusing realities, like the realities of suffering. And, and I purposely watch certain things on CNN that has some of the world, some things that are going on in the world and the suffering of other people worldwide. And I force myself to watch it. There's this one country, and I can't remember the name right now. There's most of the children are, unless they're going to be, given food and water,
Yemen,
are going. There's a country that was recently Yemen. Thank you. The name slipped me. So if you don't know what's going on in Yemen right now, there's children that are skin and bone, and it's hard to watch that, but I force myself to watch it so that I experience those emotions, and I'm connected with other human beings in other countries. And, so it's hard, but it's a necessary process for us to not shy away from each other's suffering, but embrace each other. And
in order to get past this.
Yeah. So I just wanted to.
But I do now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a tough process.
Mm-hmm.
But we got to do it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Jason, for your participation and keep speaking. Jason, it's good to hear you.
Let's see, Jason, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay, great. Let me put myself on gallery view because I'm not. So there we go. Nice, I can see everybody. Oh, there we go. There we go. Yeah. So yeah. I invited Jason to speak, and then, I didn't give any parameters, just say whatever you want to say. And Jason's extremely bright and a leader of youth. And I always admire, the reason why I want to emphasize, Jason and Kyle, and the reason why is because to grow up in this society where there's so much immorality and negativity and things are polarized, and to maintain your sense of nobility is a sign of great character, right? It's so I'm so proud of you, Jason, I think Kyle is logged off, to be able to do that. In other words, you're my hero. You really are, Jason. You are my hero, because I wasn't able to do it at your age. I faltered and fell and stumbled and crumbled under. And so I look at you and I go, wow, the next generation, they really, really have it. So you're my hero, actually. So
Be well and stay safe, everyone.
Yes.
yeah. And then I see, you're welcome. And then I see Elena and Shaheen, you guys are here. This is my sister Elena and my brother-in-law Shaheen. Thank you for being here. You got the beanie on, looking sharp. Okay.
It's chilly in LA today.
It's extra cold.
It was like 65 degrees, you know.
Yeah. Well, turn on the heat or something.
We have a space heater right here.
All right. Well, I'm glad you guys are here.
Climate as well. But that was awesome, Bob. Thank you so much for your commitment.
My pleasure. I'm glad you guys were able to make it. And so good to have you here. And so Philip and I are going to stay here. You guys can hang out as long as you want and log off when you feel moved to log off. And
thanks, Bob. Thank you, Philip. What a brilliant space to have created.
Such a wonderful job. Really, thank you so much for making this happen. And also, did you all see the 2-minute promo short video?
Oh yeah, right. Philip.
Philip did that.
Yeah.
Hey Hoda, did you,
bringing all this talent together.
Hey Hoda, did you see yourself in the video he put together on?
I did.
You were in there.
That was a picture I had taken in Alaska. That was a bit.
That's sweet.
Little surprise there, huh?
Yeah, that was really brilliant. Thank you so much for that. And if it's okay, I do a shout out for our Soul Connection. We have once a month a meeting of the hearts, trying to bring people together through their music, their art, and bringing space for the holy writings to be shared. So that's next month, called Soul Connection. So I'll try to get that information out as well.
Awesome. Yeah, my sister does a lot of a unique devotional prayer meeting. It's a lot of art, a lot of young people showing up, and she's really promoting a lot of youth and children in her community, and that's just beautiful. But to see a devotional that's really heavy on arts and is really a beautiful thing. We need more arts in our respective communities. So good
right,
job.
and that's really it was something that was initiated. I had met the Unity minister some couple of years ago at a race unity event inspired through the Baha'i community, and we collaborated with a coworker who's involved with the Compassionate campaign. It's a Compassionate Cities throughout the world, and we've been collaborating. So then I got the Baha'i local community of Pomona involved, and then I had a download to introduce Compassionate Ambassador Award. So the whole Compassionate Cities has supported that effort, and so we identify people who are actually compassionate, and then give them a space to just share their story. But for me, it seems like a real action-oriented place, because you can see and get ideas. Okay, who's already doing the work, in real life, right? So it's just one little thing that's added. So it's kind of, the idea is sort of kind of a two-part, but more integrated in how we approach it. So you have this sort of this spiritual foundation with the music and art, and just as a space to show that people who are doing these things, it connects us all. That's really beautiful to witness it in action. So it's a community that's building and growing. And again, we just welcome everybody.
Please put it in the chat, Mitra.
Yeah, let me see if I can manage to do that.
I want to give a little shout out to Diana Bates. So Diana Bates, dear friend of mine, she also lives in San Jose where I live. And people, as far as African-American, it's Diana, it's myself, my son, and I think that's it. So we need more diversity in San Jose, and what we need to all strive for. So Diana, I'm so glad you're here, supporting this effort. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Yes.
Excellent.
Yes. So Robert has been attending in our community. We do every 2 weeks or so, we do a healing racism discourse. And Robert's one of our regulars and has taken this journey. Rob, you want to share anything about your journey? I mean, you've been really for the last year on this quest for learning, and
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so yeah, I've been attending Bob's and two other presenters, Juan Carlos and Maya are all the co-presenters, and it's been really good. I've learned a lot through that. And I also took the anti-Black racism course offered by Wilmette Institute. And that was very eye-opening. And there's so many resources they give you. It's like drinking from a fire hose and you can't keep up. And they keep that information available so you can use it for up to a year, or maybe longer. I hope longer. Yeah, and the reason I got started looking into this is partly through Nari Chan, who's in our community, who encouraged us to take this anti-Black racism course at Wilmette Institute, but also was a coworker who had hosted 3 sessions at work for all the employees to come together and talk about the thing with George Floyd. And she's African-American herself. And she was actually in tears and crying at the very beginning of each of these sessions. And she's the host. And but she kept it together while she's crying. And it was very, it touched my heart deeply and made me think about why is she crying? Why is it? Because I didn't see what she saw and I was unaware of all the things that had happened. And so the last 8 months or so since then, I've learned a lot, and now I understand why she's crying and why there's so much oppression. And I understand that white folks are to blame for what's happened to the Black population in this country. And we need to change. And being a Baha'i, I thought I knew what racism was, but I didn't. Now I think I have a good handle on it, and I continue to learn. And I encourage others to learn as well. Like Bob said earlier in his presentation, get a Black friend, right? It's easy to make Black Baha'i friends, really easy, because I don't worry about preconceived notions when I enter a room with Black Baha'is. But people outside that aren't Baha'is, I found I had this, it's not an apprehension, but I didn't try to develop a deep relationship. And so now I'm starting to do that. I have a friend at work now. He's not a Baha'i, he's Black. He's a lovely, lovely young man. Well, younger than me, I should say. And we're developing this friendship slowly. And I don't get to see him much, but every time I go into the office, which is like every 2 weeks, we talk for like 30 minutes. So it's a growing friendship. And then I also invited to your talk, Bob, the Tri-City Interfaith Council members. A number of them couldn't make it today. I know one person was able to make it to today, but they're anxiously looking forward to seeing the recording of this. So I look forward to getting a copy of that.
Okay. So Philip will make that happen and get you a recording. But Robert, thank you. I've seen you take your journey, and thank you for supporting what we do and in San Jose and being here today. And I love, building these allies and people that, because the more it's about the collective, the more people we get involved in this, like a candle's burning, right? So one candle lights another one and we keep lighting each other. And then all of a sudden the world is illumined with the light of God. So that's how I view this thing, is we just keep lighting each other. And it's all, and at the end of the day, what is it all about? It's all about love. It's all about bringing us together in that context. So anyone else want to?
Love if we don't have justice.
Yes. Well, no. Yeah.
Yeah.
It starts with justice.
Yeah, I love this quote that I kind of always hold at the forefront of my heart and mind. It's from the writings of Baha'u'llah, and he says, "Thine eyes be turned towards justice. Choose thou for thy neighbor that which thou choosest for thyself." And the purpose of justice is the appearance of unity amongst men. If we have no justice, we cannot have true love. We cannot have unity.
Yes. Yes. A truism. Anyone else want to share anything? It's open floor for anybody who wants to share.
I want to say something again. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Hi, Cynthia Phillips. I just want to say thank you. This was incredible, and it was so timely. My community, my county, it's very large, Prince William County, Virginia. They just started this forum on racial and social justice, and they're opening up a town hall meeting next week on the 18th. And I wrote in not thinking that they would pick me, and they asked me to speak.
Oh.
So I'm terrified.
You'll be fine.
So I reached out to you on a email and a chat, and I'm asking you, what should I say? Because the focus is on policing. So God basically had you speak, so that you could tell me what to say.
Well,
so
I'll tell you what. I'm gonna, if email's in the chat, Cynthia, I'm gonna I'll just send you my entire slide deck, so you can take parts of it, and if there's a way you can do you can however you want to spin the information that suits your needs. I'll send you my slide deck so that you can then take the information and spin it that way.
That would be fantastic.
It'll have all the videos, everything.
Oh, great, because it's going to be 3 minutes. Thank you. What I was actually hoping,
3 minutes.
No, what I was actually hoping is that maybe I could maybe say a plug for you, and maybe you would be willing in the future to give a presentation, because it's a very large county. Prince William County is huge.
I'd love to, yeah.
Yes, and I love this. So like God sent you here to help me, because I was like, what do I say?
Yeah. Well, I think several things. Yeah, I think several things have.
Send me that,
Okay.
and I will see if maybe they will. And I'm sending you something right now. Maybe they will even allow you to speak in my stead, or just to make an appointment to give this presentation, because
Sure.
I haven't heard anything anywhere as close to the understanding as what I've heard from you today. So what you are saying, both of you, what it needs to be said, it's said the right way, it's said the right tone, and it has that future, what do we do now? And that's what always gets people stuck. What do we do now?
Thanks, Cynthia.
Yes.
Just we'll be in touch via email, and
thank you, because it's on the 18th. So needless to say, I need to get this together very quick.
Okay, I'll send it to you tonight.
Thank you.
So you can
thank you.
have that.
Something just moved me to make this comment as Bob encouraged us to, or those who are white or non-Black, to find an African-American friend. Definitely do that. That's what's going to heal. But I want to give it with one caveat, because it is one of the most rocky situations you can get into. And this is specifically for our Caucasian friends. You know in your heart you're not racist, but someone may read something that you say or do the wrong way, specifically a Black person, and to use that newfound Black friend as your defense is a major trigger for most African Americans. I'm not racist. I have a Black friend. What I would like to do is give you an alternative response when you are wrongly accused of racism. Just say, got it all wrong. I'm trying to find more Black people that I can connect with. Uses it a lot better than I'm not racist, I have a Black friend. Because those of us who are Black and we hear that, the first thing we think of is, if you are counting how many Black friends you have,
right,
very definition of a racist. So just a word, and there will be other, and some people may not agree with that, what I've just said, but the point is, find creative ways to express your lack of racism in your life. That is not one of them, nor should it ever be, that I have a Black friend. All right, so that's just from that's an insider tip.
Thank you.
What's that?
Yep. Anyone else would like to share? I love
Yeah,
hearing
me.
it.
Diana,
Hi, Diana.
you know you're wonderful. You're a
You're
star.
wonderful.
Yeah.
You're wonderful.
Yeah, really. And I mean, when you did that presentation in the, way back about a half a year ago, you did it at the Baha'i Center. You took it I told you before, you have to take this on the road. I did say that. and that you're doing a fabulous, fabulous job. And anybody else is connected with what's going on right now with you, it's fabulous. And I look forward to the next journey.
Yeah, thanks, Diana. And it's amazing who shows up in your life. So Hoda and Philip and Eugenia and my sister's always had my back, so she's always there. But those folks are the ones, you know, like kind of moving this thing forward, and everyone here that I know personally have impacted me in a positive way. So yeah, it's just a matter of getting the message out. And I think my main thing is this, that we need to confront the truth. And this is where I come from. Like, once we can confront the truth, like for example, when a doctor or a surgeon is like looking at a patient, they want to know fully every aspect of the problem, right? They're not saying, well, I only want to know just this part of your body having a problem. They look holistically and they say, I want to know everything that's wrong with this body so that I can then prescribe the right remedy to address all these issues. And failure to do that could lead to all sorts of problems. And I think when our society, we just don't, because when it comes to Black history, we'd rather say, you hear this all the time, can we just move forward? Like, I don't want to look back. I want to just stop all this, you know, showing the Black folks hanging, and it's very hard for people, but it's something that it's necessary. So those who take the journey, it's very difficult at first, but then it's like a muscle, right? You get, you know, it's painful, like you get little micro tears in your muscles and it's hurting. And after a while, you start developing those muscles and you go, oh, I got this now, right? And then it's easier having the conversations. The first time it can be very shocking. Mm-hmm. And so I'm aware of what I'm doing. I shock people, I'm not kind of unapologetic about it. And so this time I tried something a little different. If you notice, I tried positioning justice at the beginning so that people can understand like what, you know, ultimately what we're talking about is justice. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm going to continue doing that, that's going to be my lead, because I think that, you know, I learned this from, is Barbara still here? I learned from Barbara Talley, who's like Hoda, is Hoda still here? No, Hoda logged off, but yeah, she's my mentor as well. And she talked about,
no.
Okay, Hoda, yeah, I was just talking about Barbara Talley. She's your mentor. She's also my mentor too. I've adopted her without her knowing, but she talked about always positioning justice so that people feel secure when you talk about these difficult subjects. Because if you don't do that, then people feel like they're out without a life raft. There's no life raft here. We're just like, where are we? We're like floating in this danger zone of like complaints and death and pain and suffering, you know, for what, right. Why are we, you know, what are we doing this for? Well, for justice.
And, you know, if it's okay, I would like to share, in light of mentorship, I was in Switzerland, near Switzerland, a little country, for 15 years. And one of the professors I was working with, Dr. Gamagami, he has a whole peace institute, and it's based on love. But all his 3 sons and they focus, they're very involved with the justice. Like all of their clients, everyone is, you know, really working and helping people resolve a lot of issues because of the justice is the foundation. And I had another mentor there, Rosemary Sabet. She's recently passed away. And she would always tell me, Amitra, we got to get this justice going. There's no love and unity and all this peace we're trying to, you know, it's very clear in the faith as well, in every religion, you know, the sense of justice being, you know, the precursor to this peace and unity. And the reason I mentioned Dr. Gamagami is because the love, as he talked and as he teaches, is that you need, like, love and truth, they're interchangeable, you know, in my humble way of trying to like bring that, and you all probably know it, but for me, I like it. It's a simple way to think and navigate in my life when I think, okay, is something that I'm doing, is this loving, right? Is it loving? And in every moment. And if it's truthful, that, you know, there's this feeling that, you know, like, for example, something practical, when people say, okay, you love someone, and it doesn't mean that they can just do whatever they want, right? So I guess I'm sharing this with you because it was something I could and can do very practically, and ask in every moment, is this loving, right? And this idea of truth and love being very interchangeable, right? It's just, because every religion is based on love, right? So it's just this idea of truth, and that how you have to have justice before you can get to this peace and unity. And I say that because it was a learning that I had to come into, because a lot of times people who are trying to be spiritual and walk the straight path can sometimes be considered weak. And so I had to realize, oh, okay, this being truthful as a foundation and love, they're there's the most powerful force in the universe, right? The love. So hopefully you were able to follow that line of thought, because it was awakening. I'll say one last thing. For example, this idea of compassion, the soul connection, the main principle every time is based on compassion and and beauty. And then this next time it's talking about being kind and service. So, and I share this because this idea of being compassionate and kind, a lot of times I had it mixed up, because it didn't mean that, you can just accept people lying or being deceivers or having selfish motives. So that was what I had to come to understand, is that there's that line. That's not just. When people are lying, you got to tell them they're lying, because that's the truth. That's the, that goes back to that justice. And so that's part of what you're doing. It's like, we've had a lot of lies, right, that have been projected. And now as we tell the truth about our history, then this is a way of being of service. This is a way of showing love, because then we're building bridges to create this unity, right? So I just said that because it took me a long time to finally really understand there are those areas where you cannot be compassionate with people. You can't. It's not anything spiritual. And it's really clear in our writings that it says, if someone's lying, if they're a deceiver, they have selfish motives, right? And these are grounds where you cannot be compassionate to those kinds of behaviors. And so I'm just feeling encouraged to be bold.
It's good.
My sister. I just realized it's 7:30. It's Eastern time. So my husband was like, "Are we gonna break fast tonight?" And I totally. But I just want to add one thing. You know what, Bob, you did for me the first time I heard you? I had proof that the system is rigged, because I hear a lot about the criminalization and the pathologizing of people of African descent. In the 40 years that I've lived here in America, I've really realized that there's two Americas, one black, one white, separate, unequal, and hostile. But regarding how the system is set up at a great disadvantage against people of African descent versus the privilege that I get as a white or white passing person, I could not live with myself anymore. And that's why this needs to be shared everywhere, so that we know how the policing system, because of these laws like qualified immunity that started in 1982, and I was wondering what was going on before that. How come all of a sudden they created this law? So I just wanted we need to be able to speak up and magnify and amplify the truth that we've heard today. And it takes courage. And I really take a great leaf of courage from you, because in order to speak truth, you need courage. Yeah. And Bob, regarding everything that you're doing, that's why we need to say a lot of prayers of protection for you.
Yeah, thank you. I've already lost a couple of friends with this topic, but it's okay, police friends. So it's something that is perceived a little differently by some folks as breaking that blue silence and exposing stuff that's kind of like always been an institutional secret. But the silence has to be broken, and we need this to stop. Yes. Justice needs to reign.
Yes. Yeah. And it was interesting when I heard my brother for the first time, it was relatively recently, tell me that one of the grounds for shooting someone as a police officer is if you feel fear. And then I went all the way to Switzerland and being in an environment and that whole area where my kids included, were playing games called Who's Afraid of the Black Man? Who's Afraid of Black Peter? I mean, it was endless. And I thought, wow, that goes deep into the history of, being, and it was always a negative thing. It's like whatever the game is, if you got that black card, you were losing. And it just was so subconscious. No one would even consider that it was a problem until I actually said, sorry, excuse me, my kids we're not playing this game, right? And it literally, of course, some people said, oh, maybe I'm a little crazy or whatever, but I know at least they stopped for a period of playing some of those games, but again, it just at least requires an awareness and being open to really try to hear the truth about things being historically racist and creating that whole anti-negative Black image, and when I lived in China for a short period, and it was the same thing, I wore my hair real straight, was vegetarian, very thin, and it's like, wait, what's going on with this, darker skin not still being as good? And they say, oh, well, it's because if you're dark, you work in the field, so you don't have as much money. So there's this whole prejudice against people of color because there's a stereotype of them not, having the economics. But it's just, it's in Japan. It's like this world thing. But the point is, it's just a lie. It's just the beauty and the magic and the gift that is actually given to Black people. It's such a rewarding reminder and realization, because I really honestly feel like I got thrown way off of who I really am and the contributions that I need to make as a Black woman of color. And it really was Barbara who helped kind of bring the Baha'i writings to light, whether, my love for Christ. It just, I went to Spelman and they said from the day one, ladies, your crown has already been, made, just wear it. And I'm like, yes, like, let me, and I navigate, I believe, more powerful in the world, because I feel, I don't want to get too personal, but it's just interesting how subtly these things can break you down, this whole anti-Black, and you don't even realize you're not in your full power, and to kind of feel like, oh, okay, I just woke up again, and I love my sister Eugenia. I just look at her and smile with her beauty, and it's just reflecting her encouragement and confidence. So I'm just happy to be here.
Mother in the car.
I want to hear from others. Caroline, where are you from? What city? You're on mute though. There we go.
I'm in Santa Cruz.
Santa Cruz. Oh, okay. All right. You and Eugenia are living there. That's awesome. Wonderful.
Yes.
So glad you were here. Thank you for being here.
Eugenia and I are that close.
Yes. Wonderful.
2016, because of politics, I got involved in a whole lot of organizations, and unless they were specifically Black organizations, I did not find people of color. I know that the percentages of people of color in Santa Cruz County is low. There's a lot more Hispanics than Blacks, but because I was reaching out, I found other of color. Eugenia's group, this group, the NAACP, SCORE, a few things. But if people are looking to make friends, join these Black groups. There's not enough of them to spread around to go into these other groups where you are active.
Wonderful action suggestion. Wonderful.
Well, Bob, can you hear me, Bob?
I hear you.
Hi, my name is Colette, and Gabriel and Grant are my sons. And I made a point to sit them down to listen to this program, to open their eyes and they're constantly, oh, Mom, we know about racism. I said, you don't know the deep core of it. And that's what you need to understand. He says, you're frightening me, Mom. I said, no, I want to make you aware, darling. I'm not trying to frighten you of this world. I'm trying to open your eyes. So when you walk out this door, knowing that you're a Black man in America, that you understand what you're dealing with, and that you have strong core backgrounds that you can work with, and you have good faith. Those things make a difference. So if you're understanding your past, you can understand what you might be up against in the future. So thank you, Bob. Thank you.
No, thank you.
They ran out of here, but I made them sit here. No, you're gonna sit here and understand what we do, because it's not a lot of this truth that they can hear from a Black man. That's coming from Mom, different story, but coming from a Black man who was in the system, who understood the system, they look like, wow, we didn't know that. No, it's a lot of things you don't know. They're 14, they're twin boys, and they're 14 years old.
Okay.
So that was a very eye-opening, and I'm gonna keep them close. I asked for a copy of your production,
Okay.
and I'm trying to discuss to them about activism, getting active. This is what John Lewis was talking about. These are the things you need to understand. If you don't get active, you can't complain. Don't complain if you're not going to stand out there and make a difference.
That's it.
So I get it. And I really am thankful. I may not show my picture, but I'm thankful that I saw this production. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And how far did they get? How did they last the whole time, or did they kind of?
They last the whole time. Now,
okay.
People fell asleep a couple of times, but Grant held on.
All right.
So,
Yeah. Great job.
Thank you.
Oh, great. Who was just speaking?
My name is Colette, and my cousin from Maryland is the one who sent me the link, and she's a Baha'i, and I'm in Los Angeles, but she lives in Maryland, and that's how you have to listen to it. Come listen to it. Turn him on. So we made a point to sit down and listen to it.
Nice.
It was so worth it.
Colette, next Sunday, if you'd like, you can have your boys join. We're trying to get more youth on that program, and usually Bob joins and Philip, so that would be awesome to have them participate. Especially if they have any kind of, if they have anything they'd like to share, any kind of music or poetry or anything, video, photography.
That's a 14-year-old, they're so focused on Roblox and Minecraft, and I'm like, go ride your bike. Just go ride your bike.
Right on.
I restrict them on only so many hours a day or Monday through Thursday, none at all. So
all right. Well, maybe try to just, because I put it in it's chat. You might have to scroll up a bit, or I can do that for you. Just consider, maybe you can do a roadblock. They can do roadblocks after, It just might expose them to some others who are around their age, who are trying to do positive things in a practical way. So just kind of building a community for that. And I'm a teacher also, by the way, middle school, high school science as well, some other things that I do, but as you probably already know, 14 is it. That is the most important age. I have so much respect for you as a mother, for you to have them be present today. I know what that's like, but I know that the opposite of not having them exposed to something, then you're just not doing your job, right? So I'm just full of respect for you, and I just encourage you, because you may already know this, I repeat it, 14 is it. Whatever they're getting now is gonna be what they're gonna carry into the future. So it's just the fact of how our brains function. The scientists, the medical professionals confirm that the brain, the part of memory in your brain at 15, it becomes solidified. So pretty much whatever you're giving them now, whatever societies teach them, all those things, it kind of locks in as to who they're going to be. So by you can exposing them to, the music, art, sports, all the good things that they can be exposed to, is what sets the stage for their future.
Thank you. I keep that in mind. I
say
know.
it because it's hard. I have a 17, 18. Trust me, I'm just kind of trying to skip to ahead and say, this is such a critical time for you and your kids.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I want to hear.
Hello, Bob.
Okay, Michael. I'm calling a few other folks. So Michael, yes.
Yeah,
how you doing, Michael?
Michael Bernard from Albuquerque. I just wanted to say how much I enjoyed your presentation today, and of course all your Friday night series. That I look forward to those. And well, if you're going to do another one of these, I will look forward to that and hope I can attend. I have to leave now because in about an hour we have our monthly community devotional, and I need to go to that. So, but it was wonderful seeing you, and I hope if I ever get to visit my daughter and her family in San Jose again and attend Feast in San Jose,
Yes.
I hope I can meet you in person.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, well, good night, everybody, and
Good
aloha.
night. Aloha. So I want to hear from those we haven't heard from yet. Tammy, where are you from? Is it?
I live in Inglewood, California.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice. Yes. I'm glad
Very
you're here.
informative. I learned a lot. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. I'm glad you were able to make it.
So you're in San Jose? Is that what I just heard?
Oh, Inglewood, California.
I'm in Inglewood. You're in San Jose, California?
Oh, yes. I'm in San Jose. Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ronald, where are you from?
Yeah, I was trying to get your attention.
Oh, okay.
And this is wonderful. I know I'm being redundant about the wonderful part, but a couple things that I kind of would like to share. One is, and I won't say how I learned it, but I did learn it the hard way, that we're only as sick as the secrets we keep. So a lot of, and then the second thing, whether it's blue silence or what, any profession, the whole idea is it's the status quo. We want to keep it like it is, which in the case of, say, white privilege or white supremacy, it's like, this is how it is. We are on top, and universally, worldwide, everybody's agreed that Black people belong on the bottom. So that's how you get the Chinese, the Japanese, or anybody else, or even people who will say, who are told, don't feel too bad, at least you're not Black. Okay, so the other thing is, and since there are a number of Baha'is here, talk about the term materialism. As far as I'm concerned, that's the umbrella that under which a lot of this stuff fits, because it's about who gets what, how much, and who's high on the hierarchy. How far are you on the ladder? Where do you belong? And largely a small percentage of the world's population, and I'm going to be honest, since we're talking about honest, stole most of what they have. And the idea is, if you start talking about things like reparations or stuff like that, it's like, wait a minute, I stole it fair and square, and I'm not giving it back, especially if I value material goods more than anything else. This is how people can, and I'm going to suggest that it isn't just restricted to police. This is why we have people willing to shoot you over anything. I mean, it's like, if it comes down to money or some sort of, people killing for insurance purposes, people like here in Chicago, I don't know if anybody's heard about this, but we've got an epidemic of carjackings. I mean, the carjackings have doubled over last year. They even know which cars to take. I learned things in the news, like the Jeep, the Jeep line. Apparently, their computer system can be hacked And so a lot of people are being targeted because they've got late model Jeeps. Some of the kids that are doing these carjackings and going to prison for it are 14. So it's interesting that that 14 was mentioned as an age as to what, you know, what a kid is at 14 is what he or she is likely to be. So anyway, I also have a reputation of, if you give me a quarter, you're going to get $5 worth. So I'm going to kind of leave it at that. But I just thought that we need to look at materialism also as a trigger, because that's really what the racism thing was invented for. Bacon's Rebellion, if you don't know what happened there, Bacon's Rebellion, it's like, what do you mean blacks and whites are getting together and getting along? Can't have that. So you can actually go back to Bacon's Rebellion and say, okay, that's when white people started receiving more and more privileges and black people were forced into chattel slavery. But anyway, like I said, I'll leave it at that. And thanks, Bob. And I'll be contacting you.
Yeah, absolutely, Ronald. And I'm smiling as you're talking because I'm relating to what you're saying. Philip and I were talking earlier about, we were almost in a joking context, like, you know, this whole thing started over money.
It did. It did.
So,
it did.
I mean, and then the lie perpetuated, and then generation after generation, they start believing the lie. But then those first group of people, they had a little club meeting and said, you know what? We can keep this to ourselves. All this money we're about to make. So yeah, it's and then, you know, by the time the Civil War, the amount of money this country was making in slavery is just off the chart. Millions and millions of dollars made off chattel slavery. But you know, it's about, yes, you're touching on something very significant, is what is the prime motivation behind it? Everything else is cognitive dissonance efforts, right? Justifications as to why you're doing what you're doing. But what is the primary motive? It's that, you know, wanting to maintain resources that you want to keep to yourselves. You know, ironically, though, the idea of keeping resources to yourself, you think in terms of resources as a limited commodity. So you're thinking in terms of limitation. Whereas, you know, whereas in reality, God made plenty for everybody. God did not make limitations. Look at how God creates a tree, a fruit tree, right? Each tree has fruit, and each fruit has a number of seeds, and each seed has a potential to grow another tree. I mean, it's an endless. God didn't make limitations, and so but somehow we're thinking in terms of in a limited way, and we think we need to hoard and keep things to ourselves. But the reality is that's not how God created the world. He created the world, a world of plenty. There's enough to share for everybody. You know. So anyhow, Ron,
Keeping in balance, right?
I'd like to talk to you offline, Robert, about this, because I think I love this conversation about materialism is a really enlightening conversation. So we'll have further conversations about that, hopefully. Anyone else want to share anything? Let's see. Kevin Genus?
Well, not Genius, but Genus.
Genus.
We had done.
I do appreciate what you've done. I'm curious, is the recording going to be made available?
Philip.
Yes, it will. And I will, I'm going to see about sending a link to everyone and putting it online, but do note that it's going to be an incredibly long one. So you will hit the download button if you're indeed doing that, and walk away and go have a meal or something and come back. But if you click it and expect that it will immediately start playing, that's not going to happen. So, but yes, I will definitely make it available for everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Kevin. Let's see. David N, did you want to share anything? David N, you don't have to. I'm just saying, if you give you an opportunity.
Sure. I just want to say thank you. I think this was amazing. I was actually an EMT for quite a while, so knowing that history definitely is a very powerful thing.
Yeah.
And it was nice to be participating in a large national group looking to build connection and then go out to take action.
Mm-hmm.
It's very powerful.
Thank you, David.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. In the end, it's that action component. What can we do is so important, but do it in a moving in a intelligent manner, right? Based on being informed. Let's see, who else here? Sonia, the real one. I love that. You want to share?
Thank you for the presentation. I really appreciated it. I want to hear the next one and download it. And I do believe that there is a correlation, like personally speaking in my life, that every city that I've lived in, I've been to jail in. And every city that I've lived in, I haven't been necessarily welcomed in my community. And I just feel like just coming into, I'm a second generation Baha'i. And typically when we go to gatherings and usually at a nice house, there's something to be said when for every $100, I got 5. There's something to be said about that. Thank you.
Yeah. The wealth gap. Let's see. Phone number ending in 2502. Would you like to share anything? There's a phone number there. Okay, let's see, who hasn't spoken yet? Okay, we're gonna go to Hebre, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Hopefully I pronounced it correctly.
Yes, you did. Hebra.
Hebra, beautiful name, Hebra. I love that, that's good.
Thank you. Yeah, really, thank you so much. It was very, very informative. And for me, especially coming from other country, being a Black woman, not knowing what's going on, this is really explains for what's happening in our life too, just because of our color. So,
oh, wonderful! Yeah. I think people coming here for the first time in other countries and having some way in which they can get the uncut truth as to what happened without having to read 100 books.
Yeah,
I think that's good. So, thanks for that.
With Barbara's program and yours today, and the other day, just really give connection for everything what happened in our life, and in the future it teach us how to act, how to be, and to learn and to be sensitive to others too. It is really wonderful. Thank you.
Hebra, where are you from?
I'm from Ethiopia.
Wonderful. When Africa was my understanding of the history of being colonized, they tried to defeat Ethiopia, but the Ethiopian people said, no, you can't defeat us. And they stood their ground. Am I right?
Yes, it did.
Ethiopia was never colonized. They were never defeated.
Yeah, but now, now we are paying for that. Not being colonized now, indirectly we are going. So, yeah.
Hey, that's like with the Haiti, with Eugenia, you were sharing a little of that history. God bless you. See, that's history that most of us don't know, and we're fortunate to be able to start getting more educated.
The Italians have all the modern and machine or airplane, everything, but our people didn't have anything, only their faith and their courage and their, being loving their country. They won the war in six hours fighting. They won the war. So it's amazing history if you know about it.
Yeah.
But now we are weak, not as we used to be. So.
Yeah. So let's see. I think I called everybody. My memory may be failing me here, but Tammy, have you had a chance to share yet? Maybe you did, but I don't remember. I want to make sure that you get an opportunity. You're on mute though.
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Okay, you've already shared. Okay, great.
I wanted to say one more thing. Thank you for the offering to, do this again. I think you were saying one of the questions was if there are spaces where we think this could be shared again to let you know. So
yes.
I enjoy it. I appreciate the call to action in that offer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just want to be able to have a space where people can go where I prepare them ahead of time, but I say that I'm going to give you the uncut truth. I'm going to tell you what it is in terms of how I understand it, and not whitewash it. And I think that's something that we need as part of our healing and moving forward, is a space you can go to where you hear an uncut version of what happened, and not have someone sort of watering it down and kind of brushing over it, and just kind of pausing and saying, look, let's take this position like people hanging from a rope, or, like, and just pause that and just look at it and say, what caused this? This is how evil this illness is. It's a disease that really takes someone's compassion away from another human being. As I heard, I read this wonderful book. I mean, you may have read it, was it called? The Post-Slavery Syndrome by Dr. Joy.
Yeah, yes.
Post-traumatic slave syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy. And when she does the slide presentation, what she does is say, she looks at that and does the same thing, which is, let's just really look at what's happening here. And the impact of this, it really cuts both ways. There's victims hanging, but then the people watching her. And then her whole premise of the book that she wrote is, we've had the trauma for all the, the centuries, and there was no healing. There was, like, for example, if we're all adults here, but if someone, if a woman is traumatized, for example, or anybody's traumatized, particularly, with the history of rape within the slavery system, raping for centuries, and then saying, you're not going to give me any therapy. We expect you just to kind of move on. So, and then women are they're the parents of the next generation, of course, and they're taking that trauma and passing that trauma on to their children. And then you have, generational trauma being passed on. And she gives wonderful examples of how that intergenerational trauma manifests itself today. And she gave a wonderful example of this when she was saying that when her children were young. It's a really powerful story she tells. When her children were young, she's in the house cooking or doing something in the house, and her two young sons, or one of her sons or something, was outside, and she heard kind of this, almost a verbal attack against her son. So she goes out there, and what she witnesses is this group of black boys. They're all black neighborhood, black boys telling her son, like, we're going to beat you up. They're all like young teenagers, right? And so she's like, well, she wants, being an educator, she intervened and said, well, why are you wanting to beat him up? And the young kids were saying, well, he was eye mugging me. and so she had this whole discussion around this idea that the pathology manifests itself where you see other Black people and you're appalled. In other words, you see a reflection of yourself. And this is the intergenerational trauma. You see a reflection of yourself, and that's something that is appalling to you. And so you fight back again, and you're fighting back against your own self. The mirror of yourself is reflected in another Black face, and you want to just attack that. And you see that manifested in other ways. Now my own thing is this, that you see that manifested in other ways where, darker skinned Blacks feel more, they feel more inferior to our lighter skinned Black, and so you can see how it's this illness is within the Black community is very disheartening. This whole idea, and I kind of paused it in one of my slides, when you see, Black people having a difficult time forming groups and congregating. I think it's one thing that Barbara Talley tries to address, is creating a space for Black people to heal, because we haven't had that generational healing to take place, and that we need to have spaces where we can just sort of go through that process, because we've been told, families being ripped apart, that we don't want you together, right? And that message was as early as the 80s, when mass incarceration, ripping families apart. And so that message is still there, where we don't want families, we don't want congregations of Black people mobilizing. That's why it was so terrifying. I will not talk politics, but that's why it's so terrifying when Stacey Abrams, I think it was in Georgia, right? She mobilized all these Black people to do voting. And that was just terrifying. The idea of Black people mobilizing is like, now there's an effort to undercut that. And, you see within our system, efforts for voter suppression. I mean, that's the main focus. I'm not here to talk politics. What I'm here to talk about is the anti-Blackness aspect of it and how it manifests itself. It's as real today as it was, during the days of slavery. I mean, there's a lot more progress made, of course. I'm here sitting here talking to you, I'm not in shackles. So of course we made progress, but that illness is very much operating in very sadistic ways that are so subtle and so severe that people can see it and deny it at the same time. So if you're wearing the glasses of prejudice and hate, we can look at the same set of facts and see absolutely different things. It's only when you remove those glasses and remove the hate that you say, oh, these are oppressed people that need help. It's not their culture. It's not the lack of discipline. It's not the lack of effort made on their part, right? So if we accept the premise that all people are one people, if a group of people are struggling, it's not because of biology, it's because there's something in the system that's not allowing them to thrive. That has to be it. But it only starts with a perspective and a premise that people are one. And there's many examples about how to convey that point, but I just want to put that out there that some of the historical traumas that are still there. So if you haven't read the book, it's for those who are interested in learning. I think, Hoda, you've read the book probably a couple times, right? The Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, and many people have read that book. Wonderful book. I encourage you to read this book. She's a Baha'i, by the way.
What I do like the post-traumatic stress disorder book, but what I really try and focus on is what is the pathology of whiteness? What is the mindset that doesn't care about what happens to its fellow brother and sister who is just a little bit more richer in melanin? Because we're 99.99% genetically identical. What I like to know is what was the mindset of those Europeans, the Dutch, the Belgian, the English, the French, the Portuguese, the Spanish, that would allow themselves to capture people, put them on a ship. What were they thinking? What cognitive dissonance? How much were they lying to themselves as to they're not human? If God really thought them that they are one like us, that God wouldn't let this happen. God wouldn't allow slavery, or this whole concept of manifest destiny. If only, God thought that it would be wrong, he would stop it. It's just, what is that mindset? I think that mindset is what still continues on when there's no such thing as a white person, right? I mean, it's European Americans. I don't like the word Caucasian because that was invented by a German biologist, Johann Friedrich Blumenbach, because he developed this whole hierarchy of race, and he put whites on tops and blacks on the bottom, called the top people Caucasian, and then he said Negroid and Mongoloid, and as such, and then added behavioral characteristics to these very ambiguous terms, right? But because we're living in America and everything in America has been set up on white and black, until we are all treated as one, yes, we do have to refer to who needs to do what first, the supreme effort that the white needs to take in order correspondingly for the person of African descent to give up their feeling of suspicion and mistrust. So that's what I'm more interested in, is to work on my personal pathology, the mindset, so I won't be discordant, I wouldn't be estranged, I wouldn't have apathy, I would care, I would love, I would embrace, and I would want the family of humanity. We're far from being there, but we need to get on the long and thorny road beset with pitfalls, and people don't like the bumpiness and they get all kind of weird out inside. They want to leave the scene. They get upset. Yeah. So I like to work on that mindset. So that epigenetics that's just still carried on today.
Yeah. Anybody else want to respond to that or add to it?
Thank you for sharing that, Hoda. I think that mindset was planted very early, and in order to, it's very challenging, it's very difficult. We have to go back to why it was started. We went not we, I'm sorry, those who captured slaves, you know, saw it as a profiting platform. And as Philip and Bob was saying earlier, that, you know, they went to a place where Africans were of this highest dynasty and, you know, in their own element. And so those that took them saw this as a profiting, you know, you sell one, oh, then we can sell 500 and then 5,000 and all of that. And so the mindset was created that they had to be at the bottom to justify what was happening. There is a gentleman called Jeffrey Osborne that talks about the truth about the Confederacy. And so in order to even move forward, we have to go back and look at that history and look at the money, follow the money, you know, because so much of it was gain from off of slavery. And so there's so many of these companies that you can track all the money or track it and you'll see it. So there are those who don't want to give that up. And it's you know, they'll fight to the last bit to protect that. And so if we understand that first, then we can move forward. And I was even talking to Philip and I think Bob the other day, like, why is it that Blacks have to be continuously at the bottom? Now, I come from a majority, and this is so foreign, but I understand it because I had to pay to see that, and that it's painful, Hoda, and those who are in that similar basket, is very, very painful. But until we address that first, we can't get forward.
Absolutely. Thanks, Eugenia.
Oh, you're welcome.
Very powerful words. And so, Christian?
Howdy, everybody. Hey.
Hi.
Hi. Hey, all right, man. I look really white with this sun shining in.
Where are you from?
Seattle, Washington.
Nice.
Although I originally, I went to school at Berkeley, so I grew up in LA, but went to school at Berkeley, but I'm in Seattle now. But you guys got a nice weather down there, doggone it, compared to here. But I think like Hoda's saying, you know, I had a good report I wanted to share with you guys. You know, it's the whites, you know, what Shoghi Effendi said, we got to work on our attitude of superiority, abandoning it, understanding it, abandoning it. That's the major work for the white people, which I think what you're doing here is really appreciate it, you know. Just got to learn, you know, because we were taught so many lies and it's not easy to break through. But there's been, I had a meeting, I had a breakfast yesterday with a friend of mine. He's on the regional council here in Washington area. And he's a white guy. And I've been kind of working him for the last 10 years, trying to get him to, and I'm not trying to be, I did anything big, I didn't do anything big, but I'm just saying, trying to wake him up to the reality of this racial situation in America. And he just couldn't really see it, you know. And we had a conference about 2 years ago, 600 people, and it was all white speakers. It was token people in skits, which they even came right out and said that was how we were showing diversity, is by having tokenism in the skits, but all the speakers were white, you know. So, but, and we wrote them, some of us wrote them letters and we had big fights with them and everything, but he's telling me the regional council just took the anti-Black racism course together. A few months ago, they met with 50 African-American believers from the region, the special by invitation regional council meeting. The regional council has decided they're going to take all the assemblies in the region through the anti-Black racism course. They called up Wilmette and they said, no, we can't give you every spot. You know, we give you half of them, but Seattle, Portland, Tacoma, and no, Seattle, Portland, Beaverton, and Tacoma assemblies and the regional council are going through it again right now.
Oh, nice.
I mean, their goal is to have the entire assemblies of this region go through this. That is, and this, he's telling me, you know, I talked to him, he's a really good friend of mine. And I told him, you know, 6 months ago, we were talking, I said, you have to find a Black friend and make a Black friend, which he did. And he was telling me it's a council member on the regional council with him that he's working.
Oh, that doesn't count. That doesn't count. I'm just teasing.
Yeah. But he was telling me with tears in his eyes what he's learned from this man that he worked with for 10 years and didn't know. This is, something's happening. This is so wonderful. And, but the white people, we all got to get this. I mean, we were talking, you know, I know that you guys deal with this every day of your life. It's not that much to ask the whites to deal with it every day of their life. I think every day of our life, we have to fight the fight. That's what Chokyi Fendi asked us to do, make the supreme effort. So anyway, I just wanted to report, Hoda invited me to this and I saw the advertisements. It was delightful. I mean,
Were you here from the beginning, Christian?
I didn't actually. I missed the whole thing, but the
I'll
last
have to get the video.
I missed, but I'm gonna watch the video.
There you go.
But actually, I was listening to it. I forgot. I've been working on my plumbing. My sewer went out, so I'm fixing my plumbing. And I was listening to a video by Elaine Brown, who was the leader of the Black Panthers 50 years ago. Which
I'm
is
so sorry. I'm seeing Cynthia Phillips' hand up for a.
oh, okay. Anyway.
I'm so sorry. I just.
No, he can continue till he's done.
You were probably saying the same thing. So, but I'm gonna listen to your tape. Thank you. That's it. Nice to see you guys.
Thank you for those words. But Christian, I have a follow-up question for your comments. What was it, do you think, that caused the institutions to turn around to say, this is important, we're going to go through this process of learning? There's something that happened that caused that momentum shift.
What
do you think it was?
George Floyd.
Okay.
Also, the letters from the top down focus. The National was sending letters out for the last 2 years. You guys, you know, these letters have been coming out reminding people to do this, which I've never seen in 50 years of being a Baha'i. And it was over and over and over again, just the focus. And then just everybody is, you know, something's changed, you know, in our nation, something's changed. I heard somebody say, it's like at a tipping point now, and everybody notices it. The white people know it. The white people know it. They know that something's changed. And the backlash of Trump, I think, you know, for Obama and the backlash of Trump. And I think the white people are realizing something's going on here. We, you know, I don't really know though. But that's, yes, something has definitely changed a lot.
And then Christian, I never asked a white person this question, but as a Black man, I'm just curious, what did you experience when you're watching the George Floyd tape? What was your experience with that? Watching that?
It broke my heart. It's actually.
Okay.
It broke my heart. I mean, I was enraged, but I just wanted to, how powerless everyone was there in the sense of, there should have been a white man stand up and rush in there. You could have done something.
Yeah.
You might have got away with it and not get shot.
Yeah.
Interrupt that, but no one did.
Yeah. My sister who lives, she was on earlier, not Almitra, but another sister, she lives in the Sherman Oaks area down south, and all of her neighbors are pretty much a Caucasian background. And so she was talking to one of her neighbors, and the George Floyd conversation came up, and her comment was, well, isn't he a criminal? Because of his criminal background, as if he deserved to die because he was a criminal. It's one of those things that someone was saying earlier about how can we then look at people suffering and not like have some sort of response to it, and
yeah, it's that long inherited sense of superiority. I mean, I have a dear friend who I couldn't even imagine, but she even was saying in terms of like Haiti, they, like kind of like they did something bad, wrong. Like, so that's why they're the victim of, a lot of problems, as opposed to because she doesn't have the history, but she thinks she does. She think like she wouldn't come on the call because she thinks she knows everything. You know what I mean? For example. And at the same time, those insidious, these toxic ideas are just it's like perpetuating this whole disease. And like I said, she's considered, a good friend now. It's interesting as we kind of had some distance because of that, but that's sad too, because it's like, wow, you really see how this pathology is so deep on so many levels like that,
But I think it makes sense, right? If the disease of racism is viewed as a disease, one of the components of the disease, one of its aftermath or its symptoms is denial. Right. So someone denying that it doesn't exist is part of the illness, right? Yeah. So it's having that understanding is, I think, a reminder rather is important for us to realize when you encounter people who are, this doesn't exist, I don't believe it, or that's all part of the symptoms. And we all know, like if someone's like an alcoholic, for example, we all know this. So the first thing that they have to do is come to the realization themselves that they need help. So at that point, there's nothing you can do with someone that's in a state of denial. Like you have to just kind of leave them alone. They can't. It's like that alcoholic who says, I don't have a drinking problem, but yet they've lost their family, they lost their job, they're falling down drunk on the street. I mean, without even acknowledging that they have a problem. So what can you do with that?
Well said. Cynthia and David have been waiting patiently to speak.
Oh, my bad then if I've been.
So Cynthia, go ahead, and then we'll be followed by David.
Thank you. I was listening and I was taking notes because every time someone said something, I had an idea, then I came to another idea. So I think I'll probably go backwards first because you mentioned pathology. So that was the last thing in my mind. It's funny because my undergrad degree is in psychology and I worked in it for 15 years as a psychological counselor. And one of the things I put up a few years ago on my Facebook page is I looked at the definition of schizophrenia. And I took out certain words to let you know that it was schizophrenia. And at the top of it, I said, is this racism or is this schizophrenia? The definition is almost exactly the same. Wow. And I said, which one is it? They are almost the same because it does make sense because if you can look to your left and see beauty and turn your head to the right and meet, and it's just that easy for you, there is some denial there. There's a lot going on there. And the thing that allows you to do that is the same personality disorder when you're looking at schizophrenia. I mean, like I said, my undergrad was in psychology. And one of the reasons why I didn't continue it was because my teachers themselves, I went to University of Colorado Boulder, they were so toxic with what they were teaching when it came to psych, I mean, all of their examples were of dysfunction were of Black people. Now, I mean, I was like one of 75 in my lecture halls and one of 400 in my actual other classes. But the fact that these were the knowledgeable people, and their only time that they ever mentioned a Black person in my psych classes were in negative stereotypes. And I called them on it being the only Black person there. And one of them actually flunked me. I went from an A to a D. Because it was a deviance class, and I was I was taking Black studies on the side, so I had ammunition like you wouldn't believe. So that was the one thing they did, was they saved us that way. But someone was saying, well, Hoda was saying earlier, well, how do you get to the root of this? Well, luckily we have many Baha'i scholars that have already gotten to the root of it. If you listen to Derek Smith when he talks about modernity, he does a beautiful job of getting to the root of this dysfunctional thinking that broke down people from the beginning of time. So it's exactly what you expect. It has to do with the slave system basically didn't just finance America, it totally financed all of Europe. When you see that Europe became rich at the exact same time that they had gone into Africa and taken all of the resources and riches. So it was planned that way. I mean, there was actual conference in Europe that planned on going into Africa and divvying up Africa. So that wasn't some happenstance. That was actually planned. So that's what I had about that. And I'm sorry I didn't catch the white guy's name. The wonderful that was I loved what he was talking about from, I think it was Washington, that was saying that they all decided to take the course on anti-racism, which I thought was beautiful. One of the things that he said that was interesting was when he talked about finding a white friend, a Black friend. That's not so far-fetched if you do it the right way. When Trump got in office, I found myself a white friend. Because I had white associates, but I literally found myself a white friend, and she was Trump leaning, and we basically kind of unspokenly agreed to not talk about Trump. But what I did was I learned from her how they thought. I did not agree with her, and I did not compromise my values, but I did listen, and I did learn certain things, and and I did feel it was genuine friendship. If there was an emergency, I knew that she would come to my aid. And so when we talk about finding that Black friend, it's not just finding the Black friend, it's learning from the Black friend. It's being quiet and just listening and learning from them. So it's like what you said earlier. It's not just saying I have a Black friend. No, it's learning what they do, going on things. We used to like to go to movies and shopping a lot together. So it was genuine, and going out to eat. So it was a genuine, platonic kind of girlfriend kind of situation, in the old fashioned term of, not the modern day term of it. So, if you're going to get a Black friend, then make sure you're really making that friend and not being patronizing to that friend. And the last thing I'll say is when it comes to when you have a white person and the white person is genuinely trying to teach another white person how to have empathy when it comes to the causes of Black people, and if it's not quite working, often what I have found and what I tell them is that tell that person or that the white person or the white passing person to see that Black person as their own race. So if you're white, see that child that was shot, that 14-year-old kid that was shot by that cop, 5 seconds after he got out of the police car. See that child as white or white passing if you need to find the empathy. If you see that person with the knee on his neck and you can't find the empathy for him, then say, okay, if that person was white, how would you feel about that? Or if you see the unjust sentencing in the prison system, say, well, let's do the veil test. If you did not know who was going to jail, if you did not know who that punishment was going to be heaped upon, I guess, and if it was going to be Black or white, would you still feel that way if you did not know the end result? Because see, right now people are confident that it's only going to happen to Black people. But if you're genuinely being honest, and if you say, okay, if I don't know who it's going to be, would I still feel that way? If it was a disproportionate white kids being put in cages because they were trying to escape persecution at the southern border, would I still feel a way that it's okay to treat them like that? So because of my psych, I know that the mind only will do exactly what you tell it. So if you tell it a lie or an evil all these years, and you can also tell it a good, and it will believe the good as much as it will believe the evil, and over time it will act on the good. So the mind doesn't have to, you don't have to feel it so much in your heart. You just have to act on it as if you feel it, and eventually you will come to feel it, because that's the way the mind works. That's it.
Oh, thank you.
Could I
Dave,
add?
actually, no, just a moment. David has been waiting for like 30 minutes.
You're right. But can I get in there after him?
Absolutely.
I wanted to bring up the issue of emotion. It has been touched upon a number of times in the last few hours, and it is something that is rarely kind of brought front and center. I have found that, also my personal psychological development, as well as my conversations with people who seem to have a block, who seem to not be looking to understand the picture from a principal point of view, and have that divided mindset. You're talking about the schizophrenic mindset. And one of the things I found was that consistently the divide was rooted in emotion. The inability to connect the two, the inability to see or hear what I was trying to say in a logical context, in an intellectual context, was blocked. Was truly, they could not hear it because of an emotional component to what we were talking about. And it's one of the things that I've seen tied in through so much of what we've been talking about, as well as kind of in the larger conversation. And yet we still adhere a lot. We still try to imagine ourselves as rational beings. We still imagine ourselves as if we just heard the correct argument. If we just saw a piece of evidence that would be enough to allow our rational or intellectual mind to make a better decision. And what I found is that so much of it is about first being safe, feeling safe, first being able to take down that barrier of emotion, of fear, and of being able to then that the intellectual aspects of things, the actual conversations, can only happen after those barriers are down. The idea that the one that really the video that really struck me the most was the one, I apologize for not remembering his name. The one where the white cop came up to the car. He said he had a gun in his glove compartment, and like a moment after, the guy, without really any warning at all, pulled out his gun and shot him multiple times.
Yeah, that was Sterling. Sterling.
Thank you. And that was, to me, that really struck me the most. I think that's the one that I think of when I think of the fear that you were talking about. How the fear is real to them. It is rooted in reality for them, and that drives our actions. That he acted on impulse, on instinct, because of, on a primal level. That he did not decide in the same way we think of intellectually to kill him, but he was in a moment where he thought it was either him or me. And in any situation, that is a reasonable response. And then we look at it and we say, this was not a reasonable sequence of events. So what happened? It was that he had the wrong emotion. He had this overwhelming sense of fear that came from fantasy, that came from a wrong understanding of reality. And that one of the things that I've discovered when talking with people who that when I am able to, especially white people, other white people, that part of what I need to do is to connect with them in such a way that allows them to feel safe with me. Because having this conversation is a very private, very intimate thing for most people, and is so fraught with emotion that I have found that it needs to be in a safe space for them to be able to open up to me, to share with me some of the concerns, and share with me some of the, and to allow them to reconsider some of their own understandings that they cannot process, they cannot really listen to what's actually happening until they are in a place where they feel like I will be listening to them and I have accepted them unconditionally. And it is a really, the reason I bring this up is because we as a society are so unwilling to include emotion as part of who we are and how we make decisions and how we act, and our mental health. We think that we can just decide things differently and somehow we'll do things differently, and that's just not the case. And the last thing I wanted to mention was that Abdu'l Baha clearly understood this, because he, just again and again, you can see by the stories of him, the first thing that he does is he allows people to open up and to let them share their feelings. And then the people are finally able, once they've kind of emptied their cup, as it were, to then be able to listen and to be able to hear and to be able to revise their own understanding.
I just have to acknowledge, David, your words were very well said and very heartfelt. Alton Sterling, I saw the same video numerous times. I forced myself to watch these things numerous times. And he got qualified immunity. He was let off the hook. This is why there's such an outrage, and law enforcement, acting out of this unfounded fear. Like this fear wasn't necessary for this situation. But it's what you said it all. I'm not going to repeat anything you said, but great job in expounding upon that point.
Thank you.
Ronald?
I guess the one thing I had was that then the police department should train on how to reduce the fear. That seems to be a very powerful approach, perhaps, to be able to combat this, and to, as one of the techniques, one of the actions to be taken across the country.
Absolutely.
Help us with it.
Yeah.
Ronald?
Yeah, I'd like to, earlier in the presentation, Bob, you did a good job on talking about slavery and how the police department developed and things like that. And it just reminded me that a lot of this traces also back to slave revolts in which dozens of white people were killed. And I think that brought a lot forward. Another question, and I think I got this from Dr. Joy DeGroof, was that a lot of times people ask, how could you do that to another human being? Well, that's the point. You dehumanize first. So you're not killing a human being. You're killing an animal, and you're killing an animal that's gone mad. And so that's how you get a 12-year-old kid, I believe he was, shot within 2 or 3 seconds, even though the 911 people said they think that it's a kid with a gun, okay, or a toy gun, obviously. And that didn't make any difference. They rolled up on him, and the cop rolled out, and within 3 or 4 seconds, killed him. Also, there's been studies to show that Black kids are seen as being much older than they really are. So you're not shooting a child. You're shooting one of those, super predators that, people are afraid of. So I think we have to look at the dehumanization. We don't see them. And I think that was alluded to earlier, that how would you react if it was someone of your race or your ethnic background? And I'm going to bring up one thing, and it saddens me, but I think we got our answer at Sandy Hook, because there was a show, I forget what, I think McConaughey starred in it along with Samuel Jackson, and he at the end, I hope I'm not doing
Time to Kill.
Yeah, it's Time to Kill. I'm hoping I'm not doing a spoiler alert, but that was one of the premises. Go out, ask his lawyer to go out and defend as though it was a white kid. And in my wildest dreams, I did not think that you could shoot and kill a couple of dozen white kids no more than 7 years old, and there was virtually no response. In fact, there's a guy right now that's in trouble for having set up a bunch of lies and going around and saying this didn't happen. So somehow there are things that we just don't access. We can't seem to access the truth. And so I think that's it. I mean, somehow we got to do something about the dehumanization before, so that people don't see us as, super predators. I can't, for the first time in my life, I am so happy that I have a bunch of gray hair and I'm old, because I'm not seen, and that I speak a decent English, because I'm not seen as a threat. In fact, I can give you one example. In February of this year, it was surprisingly enough, it was, February of 2020. I was on my way to a funeral, and I had a Bulls cap on, and I had a car, and I was driving a fairly new car. And for the first time in my life, when I got pulled over, I looked in my side view mirror to see if the white cop had a hand on his gun. And you could see he was disappointed when he got there, because when he looked and saw who I was, and his first question to me was, "What year is this car?" Well, I picked up on that. You're trying to figure out, did I steal it? No, I didn't. But I really do believe the Bulls cap, and the fact that he couldn't really see anything until he pulled me over, because all he gave me was a warning. But the idea was I got one, and the profiling was already there. So I mean, again, and I think that a lot of young black males are seen as enemies automatically. You're automatically a criminal, which is stop and frisk, all of that, and then they wonder why they don't get the cooperation of the community. It's like you treat us already like we're guilty as charged. And then it's like, well, no. I mean, I never thought, because I grew up as somebody that was taught to respect the police. I mean, and that if you do the right thing, you don't have anything to worry about. And now I'm afraid of the police. I mean, because I don't know how they're going to take me. So again, I'm not a full human being, which is, all the way, goes all the way back to the 3/5 rule, right? We weren't complete human beings constitutional. So we need to be elevated into some form, we can't be equal until we're equal. And until the white people look us, actually see us as equal. And with that, I'll stop.
Wonderful. Thanks, Ronald, for those insights and your life experience sharing that. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to add something real quick, and Ronald touched on it at the end of his statement, because we use the word dehumanization when we really should be saying humanization, because we are defined as property. And when you're looking in the context of, years of slavery, none of that's changed for these families. You literally have families today in the South who are still trafficking people. They haven't changed. And so that whole concept of your property is still prevalent everywhere in this society.
Yeah, the racism, the most challenging issue, right? It's we never cured the illness. Now, as Baha'is, for those who are Baha'is here, Baha'u'llah has given us the remedy, and now we have to figure out how to apply it. How do we apply this remedy? We have it. So, and I think it starts with like how a doctor would approach a problem, right? Understanding first the problem, right? And then figuring out how from there, what's the appropriate ways in which we can address issues that are a wide range, right? Wide ranging. I mean, I'm going to do my little part within the criminal justice system, and that's going to take all my time. And that's all I can handle with probably the rest of my life. So I'm going to do my little part. Everybody has to do their little part in whatever way that they can. And all those parts, like rain coming down, creates a river, right? It's very powerful. Everybody doing their part. Amitra, you're smiling. What you smiling at?
You caught me. You caught me. I was thinking about how beautiful it is, and as it's part of the solution of having these groups that are diverse, you know. So I was looking at everybody, Philip being patient, and just everyone here, you know, and as that's how I understand. I think God's smiling on us when we're having these intercultural, interracial.
Yeah. I don't think Philip will mind me sharing this. He kicked everybody out of his house. It's just me and Philip in here. He's like, everybody, you got to leave. I don't want any distractions. No noises. Turn your phone off.
So he has to be able to say, you guys can come back too, right?
We have to be able to give him the space to have his family come back. So we probably, although I want to stay and share, I want Philip's family to be able to come back home. So.
And I have to go help the football team.
Yeah. So,
but
yeah,
I wasn't going to cut this off. They can.
Yeah, but we have, at this point, I feel the energy of that family. They need to come back home.
Right.
Yeah.
God bless you. Yeah, Kevin and everybody who's still here. This is really
So, but thank you. Does someone want? Can someone?
So this is how the pupil of the eye. This is how the pupil of the eye rolls. Time is not of the essence because it's a matter of the heart. If it was a typical white people meeting, okay, we've done an hour and a half. We're out of here. I love this.
Yes, it's beautiful.
And, you know, there was a question Cynthia asked earlier about, you know, who asked, what is the impetus for how the community has changed? The regional Baha'i Council is having anti-racism training. I honestly think it started with the Arise conference. Because
I think so too. The people of the eye,
African-American Baha'is were mobilized. They were like, felt this great capacity of serried lines of being together, and it became a force that could not stop them anymore. And I just want to say there's been so many conferences, virtual, there's Black Friday, there's so many Zooms going on that are led by Baha'is of African descent. So a movement has started, and us Persians and white Baha'is, we have to get on the road because you guys are leading, and we're very, very grateful to you for all this.
Thank you, Hoda.
This is the main impetus for what's happening in the Baha'i community.
Okay. So I have a Christian, and then that has to be it because I got to give Philip his house back. So Christian, and you're going to close us out, Christian. Close us out.
Okay. Well, I so great to see everybody. I think the white Baha'is have got to rise. We have to rise up. We have to work on our attitude of superiority. We have to make that supreme effort. We have to do it every day. I know I'm trying to do that. I'm struggling. I'm a white man like every other white man in this country. I'm not claiming any special thing, but I do meet a lot of white people out there in my world, and there's a long journey ahead. I think the white Baha'is and the Podi Baha'is, we have to, blessed are ye, when the black and the white come together. We have to do it. because at least we've got the mandate. The whites, you know, it's a white disease, right? Racism's a white disease. So we have to fix it. You guys are helping us, patient, loving us, putting up with us. You're in the room, you're leading us, but we have to be in there, because I don't know about those people out there, those white people out there, they got a long journey, and so do all many of us white people. But thank you for being here and inviting us and welcoming us. God bless you.
You get to have the last word.
Yeah, I'm still smiling. Oh, Bob, we can't hear you. Who? Kevin? Oh, he got cut off. Bob, we can't hear you. Is that unintentional? Oh, bless. Kevin, are you, where are you, Kevin?
I'm in New Jersey. I'm just outside of New York.
Okay. Okay, great. How did you hear about the space today? If you don't mind me asking.
Barbara Talley posted it on her Zoom call yesterday.
Okay. All right. It's good to see you. Yeah. Wonderful. Are you in the Baha'i community there, or just in general, the community person?
This is funny. I'm in an A cluster, but I'm an individual believer, right?
Right on. Right on.
We'll figure that. So Newark is maybe 25 miles from me, but I'm in the southern half of, or I'm defined as being in the lower half of New Jersey. So Pennsylvania as well.
Okay.
Go
Jeff,
figure.
I'll tell you what you are. You are the voice of the videos that we're going to be creating. So I'm going to be contacting you with your James Earl Jones voice. That is amazing.
Hey, that's what I'm talking about.
He does professionally already. That's what he does professionally.
I already knew that, but he needs to do it with us. We need the power of that voice.
So Kevin, do we have your email? Kevin, do we have your email?
Yeah, the prayer.
My email's
The Baha'i, the slave prayer.
It's Kevin at kevingenus.com.
Philip, you're awesome. Philip doesn't miss a beat.
Yeah, I just sent a message to him how gorgeous his voice is, and it's a broadcasting voice. So.
Definitely. Kevin, did you get that Zoom link for the Soul Connection? Are you going to join us next Sunday at 5?
I have. Was it emailed or?
No, I just put it in the chat. It said Soul Connection. It was just a way to get the ID and password. I don't know. Can you do that? Do you have to copy and paste? I don't know if you can do that.
I don't even see.
But more importantly, if Philip, if you guys have his contact, at least he'll be in the loop.
Okay. Yeah, right.
He should be in there somehow. If not, just go ahead and put it in the chat if you can. Or
yeah, I don't know how that works once you upload it. You can't. It seems you can't like copy and paste it. It's weird.
All right. So everyone, I got to be going back to. I have to let everybody go simply because I'm in Philip's house and his family needs to come back and he has to do a filming thing. So we really, I'd love to stay and talk, but there's time is a reality. I love you guys and thank you all for coming.
Yeah, we have to take
We'll get you guys the video. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. Awesome. Happy fasting for those.
Thank you.
I'm breaking soon.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, ooh, I like that eye. Look at that. Love it.
Some thrive on comedy. Some declare their lives are lived as profundity, and others claim they really live the real reality. The variety of our skin tones can confuse bemused delight, brown and pink and beige and purple, tan and blue and white. I've sailed upon the 7 seas and stopped in every land. I've seen the wonders of the world, not yet one common man. I know 10,000 women called Jane and Mary Jane. I've not seen any two who really were the same. Mirror twins are different, although their features jibe, and lovers think quite different thoughts while lying side by side. We love and lose in China, We weep on England's moors and laugh and moan in Guinea and thrive on Spanish shores. We seek success in Finland, are born and die in Maine. In minor ways we differ, in major we